Wonderfully silly. I think we're yeah. So it says we're live. I'm gonna start recording. And shows up on mine. I'm just gonna fire this out. I'm probably gonna turn sideways again. Why can I not see my screen? Just bear with me, Nate. This is so crazy redneck setup.
Don't worry, same thing.
So, did you get your van finished up?
No, it finished me, man. I got heat stroke, and all day I felt nauseated. So I have eight bolts to do, two tie rods, 8 bolts, and then 12 lug nuts, and I'm done. And I couldn't do it today, so it was either get sick again and skip this, or just do it tomorrow and be sick, and then just go get it aligned in the shop and call it done. So that's what I decided to do. I wasn't in any shape to go out there again. It was like a 97 today.
So, yeah, sometimes you just gotta. It sucks, but sometimes you just gotta kind of hand it over, right?
Yeah, I mean it was easy in theory, but Harbor Freight and their junk tools, I had to keep going back to the store until I gave up on automation and just used a big hammer and a fork and got it done.
You were saying that like you had to go back 3 times for air chisels because they were garbage.
Yeah, and I have the last 2 that I bought don't have any power at all. I mean, I'm just sitting there holding it on, and I could tell as soon as I put some pressure on it, there was no hammer effect at all. It was just a pulsing in the handle. And I got a big air compressor too, so it isn't that.
Yeah. So we are live now. I sent the links out. And I'm going to say, welcome back, everybody, to the After Dark show with me, Don Rogers. I'm happy to be joined again by Nathan Ciszek, and he's going to continue on with his basically an autobiographical explanation of some of the MyLab programs, black bag programs that get used on a lot of targeted individuals here in society. But Nathan, before we get into that, and I don't want to take up too much of the time because I want to hear everything you have to say. There's a member of our community right now that's missing. Okay. I don't know if you know of Angel Lori, but her partner in life, Daryl, was just released from prison after the shit that went down in Washington. And he's been missing since his release. So anybody hearing this, if you know anything about this man that's missing, contact Angel Lori, because her hubby was one of the journalists that got imprisoned after the thing at the Capitol building, and he is now missing for 2 days.
Yeah, that's sad. I don't know what to say with that. I know who you're talking about. I've never talked to her, but I've seen her on Facebook. I know that Rob is friends with her, and that's sad to hear.
Yeah.
So, you know anything about it? Just real quick before we get to things, like, did he get out of jail and just one day disappeared afterward?
She was told that his release was 2 days ago. Here's the thing: they had him on like antipsychotics, Seroquel, all of these heavy antipsychotics that he'd have just gone cold turkey off when they kicked him out the door, because they've provided this woman with no proof that they gave him an Amtrak ticket, because the prison he was in is in the middle of nowhere, right? So everybody's telling her there's no way they just kicked him out the door. But if they did, there's no way he would have ever made his Amtrak train to get back to his home to be on time for his probation. He's been missing since his release.
And they don't
And
know
it's
if
in Virginia.
Was he on the Amtrak train?
That was supposed to be arranged, but she's gotten no confirmation as to if he was given the ticket, if he purchased the ticket, anything. And yet, so if anybody knows where Daryl is or can help Angel Lori, please contact her, because this is important. And he's coming off some very heavy antipsychotics that the federal prison system made him take. So, and they're rough. Seroquel alone feels like a 4-day hangover. I've taken it. So please, if anybody knows anything, I'm kind of stammering for words, but on that, we're going to carry on to what Nathan and I were talking about the other day, because he's had lifelong experiences with extraterrestrial interaction, my labs, and a lot of things that go kind of under the radar, and they're covered by some big companies. And I think about where we had left off. I'm just looking at my own notes here. We had pretty much just ended off at your involvement in the online calls and targeting after that. So if you want to kind of swing in from there, I think that's about where we were.
Okay, before we get into that, I just wanted to mention right now, just before I came down here to sit, 60 Minutes on CBS they were doing a piece on the Havana syndrome. And I'm sure everybody knows who Scott Smelly is, or Scott Pelly. You call him Smelly because it is fake news and it does smell like BS. But they did a great story about the Havana syndrome. They pinned it all on Russia. They made the United States side look completely innocent. And I have to say that CBS is, to coin a phrase that's pretty popular, they're definitely fake news. They're CIA run. And they did an absolutely horrible job when it came to actually telling the full story, because you can look in U.S. Patent Office, and the V2K technology is patented. It was patented in 1980. And they completely omitted it from the discussion because they don't want people to know that we're doing the same thing. And the only difference is that the Russians are, hitting a few people with what I would consider to be semi-lethal technology that's more of a kind of a more destructive version than what a lot of the my labs get. But needless to say, they don't want to admit to their own guilt, and the entire news media industrial complex is full of shit. Lightly, and that's being nice about it. We've had enough of this. I mean, and what's going on with January 6th, that's another abuse of human rights, because what you've just described to me is something that you'd hear coming out of Soviet Russia.
Absolutely.
People think that everything's going well in this country, and it isn't. It isn't a witch hunt for Donald Trump, and let's give up all of our freedoms and make this a gulag for one person. I mean, this is endless nonsense. I mean, they portrayed somebody like a narcissist, so, and I'm sure he's got some narcissistic tendencies, but the reality is that the people who erroneously hate him for things they can't even describe to you verbally, when you ask them, it's all based in identity politics, and they see the narcissist that hurt them, and they associate, because the media says your daddy that abused you is now and here's your new daddy. Take a look. They look the same. It's Donald Trump. So it's ridiculous, man. And people keep falling for this garbage day after day after day. And it takes away all hope that I have that the public will ever find their ass with both hands and finally do something with it.
Before we get too far away from V2K, in the last show, you were talking about how it's often tied to media corporations, and you actually brought up something that I've mentioned a few times, but I think I finally might be talking to the right person to talk about it, is that strange little town that I told you that I grew up in. Um, we were adjacent to the region's largest Canadian Broadcasting Corporation tower, right? And this is in the early 80s. Now, the crazy thing about this town is it basically ran like the Truman Show, except for the fact that every now and then, almost on cue, there would be like a suicide where somebody would just go end their life on a back road, or a hostage taking where a farmer would snap and just kidnap his own family at gunpoint. Like there's, we watched SWAT team overtake the church that was kitty corner from our house, right? Because they had to go set up a SWAT attack. And like, you know, a 15-year-old kid worked to death by his German father, who's like less than a mile away from this goddamn tower because his dad made him work in 40-degree heat in the middle of August, walking buckets of water up and down a 3/4 mile laneway to water the fucking trees. Like, these are the things that were happening in this cute little quaint town. And what really gets me going about that is I was about 14 years old, and my mom was the school bus driver, and we were almost home. We'd literally just gotten within range of that tower. And I started hearing, "You should kill yourself. You should go home and you should kill yourself. You should kill yourself. You need to die." And I was about 14, and I went home, and I didn't even say, I walked right by my mother, went in the front door, and on the wall was my dad's 22, and in the closet was hollow points. I sat on the couch, I loaded it, Nathan, I put it in my mouth, and the neighbor girl, who was my best friend's little sister, came to borrow the video game Micro Machines. And I popped back out. But it wasn't my voice.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. What you're alleging is that they were running possibly a localized remote mind control experiment. I'm sure of that, and you can see that. I mean, every time you look into one of the, well, not every time, but most of the time when there's a high profile shooting, especially here in the United States, we've got a lot of them. And if you noticed when Trump was elected, we had it was like they had one after another, after another, after another. And they were pushing for gun control, as well as the suppression of free speech and everything else that would lead to somebody getting upset and shooting someone. So, you could tell that this was a script, that this was part of a script. And I even kind of question whether or not this whole thing with Trump that's going on is not part of a bigger script as well. So I don't want to get into that crap because it just gets into, it's like walking through a field full of cow manure, cow dung, and then expecting to get on the other side with your shoes and your pants clean. It's not going to work. But yeah, that is something that they do. And I'll give you an example of just something that happened real quick to me. Okay. I'm constantly telling people about what's going on, and it's a big problem in my life because nobody wants to hear it. So my handlers don't like me talking as well, and they want me to calm it down. So a friend of mine came over the house, and I just seen something on Facebook. Okay. And I watched this. It was a clip from I guess it was a Christian rock music documentary about celebrities selling their souls and things. And we've all seen those at some point in time. And I've laughed at them and thought it was a joke. But as I've gotten older and I've realized things, and I've seen what's going on, I've learned from my experiences, it's quite obvious they're controlling Hollywood, they're controlling music, they're controlling all forms of human artistic expression, because they want to use those things. They're really easy ways to program it. So they're controlling things. So you have one guy who's responsible for, I think, like 80% of all the top 10 hits in the last 20 years. When asked, and this guy's rumored to be a Satanist. He was alleged to have raped a pop star who sued him to get out of a contract. So he's caught up in all these. He's allegedly caught up in all of these things: the Satanism, the sex trafficking stuff. But when asked where he gets his ideas, I mean, how can one man be so talented that he can write music for any one of these stars, any one of their musical genres, and crank out top 10 hits repetitively, and 80% of the music hits are written by one person, which tells you there's something wrong with this picture. So when asked, he says he gets downloads. I mean, he gets the whole thing, and it's catered to one individual that he's working with, that he's writing music for. So if he's writing music for Beyonce, he's got her whole dance act, he's got her stage act, her music video, the concept of the song. You can hear it, he knows it all, and he can put it down on paper and make it happen for that person. Well, how does he do it? Well, he's getting downloads, and it's obvious when you hear people like our Ra talk, and other people that are connected to that aspect of it. They're using the My Labs apparently to do the music, and then this gets beamed into this guy's head using tech, and then he's put in the position to influence the way music is presented to us. So we get this basically a manufactured form of human expression that's designed to corrupt us at the very core. So I started to talk about this. And as soon as I did, the room filled up full of bad energy. I felt it. It was quite obvious, and they wanted me to feel it. And my dog and my cat started fighting as I was trying to explain this to my friend, and I couldn't get a word out because the louder I talked, the more the dog barked, and the louder the cat meowed. And they were literally right on both sides of me, between the two of us, between my friend and I, going at it. And this went on from one end to the room to the other. They followed us and surrounded us, the dog and the cat, and the energy was all around me. Finally, I'm like, that's it. I'm not going to continue to talk. I know what's happening. So I stopped the conversation, put the cat in the basement, put the dog in the cage, because he's a puppy, and went on with the conversation, but talked about something else. And when my friend left, my handler to the V2K said, we don't want you talking about this with regular people. You can talk about it with your friends that you talk about this stuff to, but not regular people. And we're going to condition you to stop doing that. And I've gotten to the point where, I'm not going to argue with that, because, every time I open my mouth to talk to somebody who's outside of this experience, they cannot relate to it. They often respond negatively. And then they'll immediately, if I touch upon something that triggers them, such as religion, for example, I will get the accusation that, hey, you're not in the real world. I am. You sit in your house, claim you're sick, crying wolf, you're being targeted by the government. Yet the world is full of joy and wonderful things, and I've got Jesus. And I don't want to hear about any of that stuff. And, I get that a lot, or not a lot, but occasionally when I do get it, it's quite profuse. It's like a pounding. It's like, you got to, this is your answer. And for those people who are just getting into this, I just want to clear the air here with religion and the targeting. You can be in the middle of a war zone and pray to whatever God you want, and that war is not going to go away. You can be in the back seat of an FBI car on the way to wherever they're going to take you for an interrogation. You can shut your eyes and pray to whatever God you have in your heart, and you're still going to arrive at FBI headquarters and get that interrogation. You're still going to go to prison. You're still going to go to court. You're still going to get fined. You're still going to get audited by the IRS, and you're still going to get targeted by the United States military and their programs. And it's not going to help you. There's times when these things have been shown to be helpful. When somebody's abducted, they invoke Jesus or things like that. Sometimes, and I think a lot of that is used as a way of convincing you that, they have to use religion and theology to control your mind. So, and I could be wrong, and I hope I am. I hope that some of this is what I'm saying, and some of this isn't. Some of it isn't. What I'm hoping to say is that those who have a good experience using that tactic to get out of an abduction, I hope that it's legitimate. But I know for so many, including myself, it never was. It wasn't something you could just say a few magic words out of the Bible and you're off the hook, and there's plenty of people in this community who are they do everything they can with the Christian church. They do the whole thing. They go through exorcisms, prayers, people lay their hands on them, and still the stuff keeps happening. It's not going to go away because you pray it away, and neither is a war. So we have to take steps in our lives to combat this. And I have not yet, as of yet, I don't think there's a way out unless it's after death, since there's really no way to get them to stop doing stuff to you unless they want to. And I think for the people that, go through the religious stuff and then they back off, I think it's just part of the program. I think it's part of the conditioning, part of the way they're treating you. If they don't need you for something, they're not going to keep bothering you. So I don't want to sound pessimistic, but it hasn't worked for me. I talk about the need to connect with God and everything, but God works through proxies, and we have to be those proxies, and we got to get ourselves out of this with some divine intervention if that's possible, if it happens. But we can't rely on that. We can't rely on saviors. So just want to get that out of the way. I've been witness to in the last 24 hours pretty intensely. So, it's always somebody.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. And it's not pessimistic to say nobody's coming to save us, because the only ones that can save us is us.
Exactly.
We have to figure all of this shit out. We have to figure out what programs are real, what people are bullshitting, what people are telling the truth. And you can't go around telling everybody they're a fucking liar because you don't agree with them, because everybody has different shit, right? It's where everything is going to line up that it's going to make the most sense to this whole community. I said this on Rob's show last night. We're programmed as a community to compete and fight and argue and try to prove each other wrong all the damn time. And we're never going to solve any of these problems if I think that guy's a liar because his memory that was put into his head isn't like mine, right? If we can't get along and we can't sit down and see the consistencies in everybody's story, nothing's ever going to happen. And you're exactly right when you say nobody's coming, because it's us.
Right. And we may have some help. I mean, I'm not going to say we don't. I mean, there's obviously help, but it's not coming in the way that the enemy wants us to think it is, which is that, one day there's going to be a landing in the White House, and that's the end of the whole problem. And that's it, or there's going to be some event that's going to take place, and suddenly we're all psychic, and then the whole charade is over with, and we can see the aliens. It's like we finally put the They Live sunglasses on, and now we can see the fish-looking people with look like a bunch of guppies with skulls and for skull faces, and everything you see around you is a hidden message. I mean, the messages aren't hidden anymore; they're in our face. The Satanism's in our face. The corporatism's in our face. The social engineering, the negative social engineering is in our face. So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I don't even want to be that guy, but Arby's. Have you seen the ad?
Not yet. What's this one?
The freaking pyramid with the eye on top of it as their fucking logo now. Like, no joke. I thought Aurora Diamond Heart posted it. I'm like, no, somebody just stuck that as a joke. And then Steven from BG Cast posted their X page. It's literally their logo. It's a pyramid with the eye on top of it now. And I'm like, you're not even trying anymore. You don't care, do you? Like, they don't.
I stopped eating there because it's so expensive. And for one, I don't want to eat fast food. But that was like, if I can get a kind of like a roast beef sandwich or something that, I mean, they even had venison for a while that I went to look for and didn't get it. But needless to say, I mean, you got $12 for a sandwich. I'd rather go to a private pit beef stand and support a family than go to that and get whatever they're putting in it, plus the all seeing. I guess it's just it's popular, man. It's in the rap videos. It's in the pop music videos. I mean, the panda eyes is another good one. Nobody knows what that is. I like telling people that. So you know what the panda eyes mean? And it's like, no, it's cute. No, it's actually rape is what it is. And if it's really forced hard, you're going to rupture blood vessels and have black eyes from it. Isn't
Yeah. I actually found that one out from a guest, and I was like, oh, that's pretty nasty. Yeah, I don't think that's nearly so cute anymore.
Yeah. Watch any pop music video. And I found one, I think it was Ava Max, right? Just on Facebook. Somebody uploaded it. And it just comes across. I'm like, okay, let's find out how long it takes to find the Illuminati symbolism. It was maybe 10, 15 seconds in. And it was like the panda eyes, the all-seeing eye that, like this and all the rest of the stuff. And then it all looks like the same thing. You have Marilyn Manson fused with, your favorite pop music star, and it's like this fusion of Satanism and like pop music. And I'm actually ready for, the Satan worshiping country redneck bands to come out next, like playing the banjo and singing about Satan. I mean, why not?
Yeah.
Why not go all the way? Make the make the sporting goods store a place of ritual and darkness. You know,
Yeah.
men with camouflage hats and camouflage t-shirts with inverted pentagrams and satanic inverted crosses tattooed to their chest. Let's go all the way with it.
Yeah. You actually just reminded me of a joke I saw on social media. It's one of those enlightening memes, but it was actually pretty damn funny. It says, "The devil whispered, 'You are not strong enough.' I replied back, 'Bitch, please, at least I didn't lose my golden fiddle to a hillbilly in Georgia.'"
Yeah, I seen that. Well, anyway,
Anyway,
well,
I actually remembered what we talked about after we got off the air last time. You were basically going to give us an altars 101
okay.
because it's like what I don't understand is like, how does it happen? What does it come from? Where does it start? Who's doing this? That kind of thing. So if you want to let her rip on that, because I'm still first day on a lot of this stuff.
Okay, so am I in a lot of ways, and I don't use other people's material because when I speak, I want to speak from the heart. I don't like having to quote people and saying this is so and so's information. So there's other people that can give a much better description of this. I'm just going to tell you what I know about it and what I've been through, and so what they do is I know that when they took me at age 6, that they already had altars from a previous lifetime. So I was already in the programs and everything else. They were just picking me up to do whatever they wanted to do with me. But I do know that they had to create new ones and new clones that had to do with this body. So they may have done a trauma split at that point. I don't know. I have to recover those memories. But I do have the last memory that surfaced with me was maybe a month and a half ago. And it was a real brief one, and it was a trauma split memory. And I've been talking to a mutual friend of ours, and he was talking about how they injected him before they put him into this machine. They put something in his mouth, they had a cable onto it. And so I didn't remember anything like that because it was edited. What they gave me was a piece of a memory. So what happened is that I was just sitting right here, and it just happened to come to me. Usually when these memories come in, they're really clear, they're like crystal clear, and it's almost as if you're going through it again. But what I've been going through is induced memory. So they're putting it in me. What they've done is they prevented me from remembering it, and they're just reintroducing it, and they're editing it. They're making it short. They're maybe adding something in, putting black boxes over someone's face, whatever it may be. In this case, I remember being in a machine. It was like a platform that I was laying on. It was hard. It was like an off-white color. It may have been glowing or just reflecting light. The machine looked like, I guess the best way to describe it is a sewing machine, because you've got on one end of the sewing machine, it's wide open. And if you can imagine like something coming up at your feet, going vertical and coming directly over top of you. So you lay inside something that's got some kind of apparatus over you, the full length of your whole body. And then you're laying on a hard platform, and it's all wide open. And it's open on each side and at your head. So what I remember is being in this machine. I didn't feel any pain in the memory because that part of it was blocked, but I had the conceptual, I had the sense about what was happening. And I was being put through a full type of pain. I mean, it was physical, but it was more emotional and psychological than anything else. And I don't know what the theme was. If I had to guess, because I was a child in this memory, it likely had to do with separation from family, whatever it may have been. Whatever it was, it overwhelmed me to the point where I was in agony, and I could hear them talk to me telepathically, and they were urging me to give them the split. They were urging me to give them something, which was the split, and if I gave it to them, the pain would stop. And that was the whole thing. So the longer it went on, the more pressure verbally that they would give me. Come on, you got to give this to us. You have to give us this split or whatever. I don't know what the words were, but the way it made me feel when I was remembering them talk to me, that's what they wanted from me. And the next thing I remember was I could see myself. I was actually phasing in and out. I was underneath this machine, inside it. There was a bright light in my face, and it was real bright. I mean, it was enough light to be painful, because everything that it was doing to you was sensory pain, emotional pain, all of it. And so I'm in it, and then I'm phasing in and out. So I can see myself in the machine, standing next to it, like hovering above it, almost like much taller than I really was. But I was looking down at myself in it, and then I was in it. So I was going back and forth, and that was the actual split process. That technology plus the trauma works like when you're trying to create a Manchurian candidate or assassin with MK Ultra. They do they inflict, trauma. They give you drugs like a psychedelic or some kind of derivative of LSD or some other new drug, and they put you in this state, and then they apply torture to you. It could be sexual, physical, mental, emotional, whatever it is. And then they get you to fracture your personality. So your mind, to preserve itself, creates an alter. Okay, so this is based in the same type of principle, but the difference is not only are you creating an alternate personality within the person, but you're creating a soul fragment, and then that alter becomes the personality of the soul fragment. And then they can use that person on a full-time basis, either on a different timeline or the one you're in. There's no real limits there. There's no limits because in reality, in the true sense reality as I know it, there is multiple versions of us all over the place in different timelines, different points in time. Everything is happening simultaneously in the mind of the creator. And you can split someone and put them all over the place, even in the same timeline, and utilize, you can take one person and create a small army or a small workforce built around one consciousness. Every one of those shards is connected through a silver cord. It's a silver life force cord. And that's, so it's basically like just spreading you out, like making copies and then connecting each one of the versions of yourself with a silver cord, so that the life force energy, and call it chi, whatever it is, it's going through everything. So you become like this. What they're doing is they're basically hijacking your consciousness on a multidimensional level and exploiting it. Because the higher self is comprised of like all the different versions of yourself collectively, and you can communicate and get in contact with that part of yourself, but not so much with the hijack portions of it, because they're program controlled if you're in the programs. So that's how I understand it to be, and from that memory, that's what they were doing. So do you have any questions before we go to the next point?
Yeah. So do you mean that there's possible stages of my consciousness attached to other living beings in this timeline?
It could be, yeah. Yes, it could be. And like, for example, I've got I have, several altars I know about, total of 3. One is high up, very high up in the military, is being, utilized for that. And that part of me came through and was able to tell me that, because I knew that my alters would be punished if they talked to me unless they were allowed to. So I wasn't going to play that game thinking that I got away with something because one of them came through. Because a lot of times when they do, it's not even them, it's actually the V2K handler masquerading as my higher self or an alter or something like that. So I went through that phase. And as that phase was kind of winding down and I started getting threats and everything, I went ahead and I thought to myself, who can I contact? Who can I get some help from? I thought of Olivia James was the first person that popped into my mind. So I reached out to her on Facebook, and a couple hours later, she got off work and we were talking on the phone. And she's really great, helpful, very, very helpful. So we decided that it would be a good idea to do a channeling session where she could try to tap into my altars and maybe communicate with my handlers, try to access some military files through remote viewing and remote influencing. So she got her friend Matthew, who's an incredibly talented medium. He's the guy that can literally do a reading with you, Don, and your loved ones will come through as images on the phone that he's talking to you on. Or all he has to do is hold a device in his hands. And he's being used by the CIA from what we can gather. That's what he had gotten. And they're actually abducting him. And then he had close to 100,000 images on his cell phone of himself interacting with a succubus, interacting with agents and being abducted in a car. There was an incident in a hotel room. It's a whole bunch of stuff. And it's like, it's a new type of abduction that I've never heard anybody talk about. And I think it's Project Traveler, which has to do with using my labs to connect with spirits, negative parasitic entities like incubus, succubus, stuff like that, jinns and things that are, and which comes from the Middle Eastern religion. So so we got together and we did a Zoom meeting, and she immediately went into a trance within a couple of minutes and was actually able to, to connect with my handlers who had previously threatened me. What I noticed was going into this whole scenario, like a week or so ahead of time, or maybe a little longer than that, is that I wasn't getting any resistance from my handlers. I wasn't getting any pushback at all. It just felt like this was too easy. It's like I called her up, everything's cool, no interference. Matthew shows up, no interference. Our energies gelled perfectly. We got, we're like, it was like meeting old friends in a sense. You knew you were with the right people. It went too smoothly. And then we did a podcast on Rob's channel, which got a lot of views. I mean, it's really, really popular because it was Matthew with his incredible story. It was Olivia James, who was like the one who was helping to tie it all together. It was myself and our friend Michael Cameron, who also is using Olivia too to get through some of these walls that he just couldn't get through any other way. And so he had Project Traveler related information to talk about. So it was a really good podcast. But I knew that things were going too smoothly because I know how this works. If they don't want me to do something, they'll make sure everything goes wrong. The only thing that went wrong for us is that one of the intel agencies got involved while we were just before we were trying to go on air, and we couldn't get any of Matthew's images we couldn't get any of those to transmit to any one of our phones or our computers. We're talking five people with computers and cell phones, and none of them worked all at the same time for the first half hour. Between whatever time we went on, it might have been 7:30 or 8. That first half hour, we were offline, or in kind, with all these people waiting because we couldn't get the images. So that was the only pushback we had. But going into this, she was able to connect with 2 altars. And I knew that this was more of a setup too, because going into this, I was having emotional issues. And, there was a female altar, and then there's a male altar that I knew was an assassin. And they threw hints at me early on. One day I heard this message. They said, "You're a nest keeper. That's what you are." And I had no idea what that was. And at the time I looked it up. I found nothing. And I'm like, "Oh, I got James Rink's text number, So I sent him a text, and he got back with me and said it's an assassin term. So I was like, great. That's all I needed to know, because that explains some of the violent stuff that came out of me as a kid. It explains to me some of the things that, go through my mind that, shouldn't be going through my mind. It just kind of like explained a lot. So it wasn't a surprise when these altars came through. And so one of the altars is a Russian altar. He looks just like me, younger version of me, because they can make these altars any age they want. They've got your genetic blueprint. So they can enhance that and make whatever version they can take. They can make a female version of you, Don, without the beard. And but same personality, maybe a little bit different. They could tweak a few things, but it would be you as a woman. And so that was the first one that came through. It was a woman named Jessie. It was me as a female, but I was not just a MyLab victim, but I was used in the Monarch program. So this was a Monarch sex slave version of myself. It wasn't physically in a body. She was inside me as another personality that they were using to influence me. So I don't know if I brought this up last time, but they use these altars against you in your life, and they will actually blend you, what they refer to me as personality rearrangement, which is when they take traits of an altar's personality that they've manufactured. They've created this based on your personality template, but they've altered it through trauma, mind control programming. So they've got what they wanted. They programmed a version of yourself. So then they can take and blend that with you. So what they did to me, to be malicious, is they gave me about a year of what I would of basically my lab gender dysphoria, where I felt like I was in the wrong body, but I still had the wherewithal to know that I was born a male, and that this is all obviously an alter that they were using, but they were doing that to me. So for 12 months I had to deal with that shit, and then they turned it off just like a light switch. When it was time for me to go and deal with something else, they just switched it right off. And the same thing happened with Olivia, not with gender dysphoria, but with sexual orientation. An altered personality was blended into her, and she became pansexual and had all of these problems in her life and relationships, which she's talked about publicly. I wouldn't bring this up if she wasn't open with it to start with. These aren't things that typically you hear. I mean, I don't know. I've seen quite a few episodes of Super Soldier Talk, maybe at least 10 or 12 of them. I've never heard anybody talk about this kind of personal stuff. I started talking about it on Rob's show a little bit. Olivia was doing it. And that's one of the reasons why we kind of, when we found each other, it's like we're kind of doing the same thing. So this is a good ally, her and I. So, but you don't hear a lot about this stuff. There's a whole personal side to this experience that people don't like to talk about, because for one, for a guy to admit something like this is like, now your manhood is being questioned. You're even questioning it yourself. But you have to be comfortable with it being, and not ashamed to talk about this stuff, because somebody has to, and somebody's got to pave the way for other people to feel comfortable to do the same thing. Because the more truth we get out about what they do to us, the better we're going to be as far as helping each other, and the more we're going to be taken seriously, because it isn't just incredibly fictional sounding space battles that most people can't understand or even comprehend that it's possible. I prefer to stick with the psychology aspect of this, the personal side of it, the personal fallout, and show a different version of what the program, the ones who run the programs that put the memories into people and get them and inspire them to talk as a form of controlled disclosure. I want to be an injection of reality into that to show a different side of this, because this is, if we're going to get any kind of recognition for our testimony, we got to get serious about it and talk about the real problems in our lives that it causes, versus the fluff and the woo, which everybody likes to gravitate towards. And that's how they turn this community into a clown show, where it just sounds like a bunch of LARPers who want to be soldiers, who want to live in a sci-fi reality, who want to be on TV, they want to be on, they want to be on the internet, they want to be a personality. Sadly, there's people like that, but we got a distinction between us.
There's times when I've had people approach me and be like, I wish I had my memories. And I feel like Adam Sandler on Billy Madison, for the love of God, don't you ever say that again. I'm like, no, you don't. Yeah, no, exactly. You fucking don't.
Like, I know the things that I've been through are absolutely terrible, because what I've been through in life, if what they've done to me in life is I know that's just the tip of the iceberg, really. So knowing that, I think a lot of the stuff is best forgotten, but at some point, if you get out of this matrix, you're going to have to deal with it all in a real way. It's all going to come flooding in. And, I think it's best to deal with as much as we can here and wake up to this so we can get ourselves out of this. So anyway, do you have any questions? I want to elaborate a little bit more on that whole thing and talk about how injuries can transfer from alters, because I actually had that experience recently.
Yeah, if you want to get into that, and then if we can end on, I wanted to just clear up for everybody, like in my boat, where like what are handlers and who's like putting them towards us? Like who are they basically? Like who's running the show? Okay. But we'll go into what you wanted to say next, and then we'll end on that.
Okay. How much time do we have tonight?
Oh, we'll go the full 2 hours.
Okay. Well, it shouldn't take that long to get to all that, but all right. So
okay, as long as you want.
Okay. So okay. Well, here's what happened. So getting back to the session we had, I had one ET come through who was an Andromeda and claimed that he knew me. He may have I'm very suspect of these things because I've been put through so many deceptions. Um, and then there was a spirit guide came through. I don't have much use for those because, I've never gotten any help from them. And I think a lot of my problems is the fact that the negative side is heavily protecting me and keeping everything out. So, my opinions of these spiritual helpers may be, may very well be skewed to the negative in regard to that because I'm not having the interactions. And when I do, they're really counterfeit beings. Maybe they're out, maybe there's some helpers out there for us. So if anybody's listening to my testimony, you got to just understand that I'm going from what I've experienced, and I'm not going to talk about what other people go through because I haven't been through that. So if you perceive me as being negative, it's because I've been put through negative things. So just take my testimony to heart, listen to it, heed the warning, and use your best judgment. I'm not trying to be negative. This is just simply what's been done to me. So we have to step out of that, way of looking at things where it's like, if you got something bad to say about the ETs, then you're not worth listening to, because in reality, it's the opposite of that. If you have something good to say, it's worth listening to, but for the most part, it's generally bad. And people ignore that. We need to focus on the bad first and then look for the good versus the opposite, because all that does is sell us down the river without a paddle. So getting back to what happened to me, I had a couple other spirit beings come through and stuff, but when it came down to the handlers, I did get some information there, not a whole lot. They were very combative, very, very belligerent, a lot of profanity, a lot of threats towards me that just press a button and make me sick and cause pain and stuff. So I challenged them to do that. I said, go ahead and press the button, because there's one particular handler named Jarrett that came through. He's the main guy. He supervises the other two. So I've actually got 3 full-time people working on me in actual real time with AI assist. So it isn't just, it isn't just a big operation and I'm just a number in it. They're actually really on top of me. And this is the reason why I have difficulty using psychic abilities and everything else, because I'm constantly being shut down. They're constantly trying to control me, and it's a constant tug of war. So anyway, getting back to this altar, I just want to talk about this real quick. And I talked about this on Rob's show too for the first time. And what happened was, and that's my neighbor calling, by the way. He always calls during podcasts, so I'm just going to have to ignore that phone ring. And I just heard it. Hold on. It's him. So he knows it, man. I mean, he's like tuned into the psychic internet. I mean, his timing is usually 10 minutes, 15 minutes in. Sometimes it's a half hour beforehand, but it's always the same shit. I mean, there's no way that he could have. Yeah, it's. I mean, this is like the universe. This isn't the universe paying me, like tapping me on the shoulder. This is the system that they got. People are on cue. So. But so anyway, Olivia picks up on this handler. I'm not this handler, but this altar, and he's a Russian guy. He's a version of me. He lives full time in this reality. He lives somewhere in Russia, and I know more about him because my handlers explained him to me. He's a big Putin guy. He thinks that Putin is literally going to fight the New World Order, but my handlers were laughing and saying that, yeah, he thinks that Putin's going to fight the New World Order and he's against and everything, but both Putin and himself are both working for the New World Order. He doesn't realize that he's going through portals. He's being activated. So I have a Russian altar that's being activated by a phone call, and they'll say a phrase. He immediately goes into the programming, alters out. He goes into the program. He opens a portal. He goes through wherever he's got to go. He either goes to a base or he comes back, but he goes to the point where he has to kill somebody. And he does the job and then leaves. And then a cleanup crew comes in, cleans it up, and then it's all done with. And he'll wake up or come around, however this happens. It probably happens in his sleep. He'll wake up with injuries. And so there's some very disturbing things here, because she said that the majority of the victims are women. There's maybe, I think, 60, 70%, I forget the ratios, but it was over 60% women, which was disturbing to me. And You know, the rest were men, and even more disturbing than those two categories is the 5% other, which I asked, and she said, yes, there are, you know, children involved too. So this alter is killing everybody that he's contracted to get rid of. So, and the reason he uses strangulation as his preferred method, which is another disturbing facet of this, is because there's less mess. It's not like a gunshot. It isn't like a stabbing. You don't have to worry about poison. You just strangle somebody. I mean, you know, it's pretty easy to clean it up. So it's efficient in that way. So anyway, this all comes out because they want me to know this. So then some time goes by. I don't know how long, a couple of weeks, whatever it was. And one particular day, I woke up, and this was about, I guess, about 2 weeks ago. I wake up and my left hand is sprained. My left hand is still sore today. It still hurts. I had to work on my vehicle yesterday, so I flared it up, but I could feel it grabbing a wrench, pulling stuff. You know, I just don't have the strength between my fingers. I don't have the grip strength, and it hurts when I try to use it. Now I have full articulation now, but before I couldn't even really make a firm fist for the first week and a half. So I get up and my hand is sprained, and it's swollen too. And so I go throughout the day, and I'm wondering, and it's getting worse because I'm trying to use it, and its swelling's getting worse. And I'm thinking, what is going on with my hand? I mean, and then I noticed I was letting the dog out. My right bicep was strained. Like I had like a mild sprain in my right arm. And then my whole upper body was like popping and cracking, like I'd been in a car accident, and then I had a pulled hamstring, and all this kind of kicked in stages. I won't get into the reason why. More of it kicked in later. It was a whole nother situation, but I felt all this, and I'm questioning it. While I'm questioning it, I get one of these, handlers come in on the V2K and said, you had a little, he said, you had a little, what did he say? You had a little struggle or something like that, is what he said. And he just kind of said it in a nonchalant way, like you had a little struggle there, Nate, something like that. And I'm thinking, and inside, I knew what he meant. But my analytical side had to pick this apart and say, what is going on? I guess, I don't want to believe this, but something's up here. So I had my intuition was telling me what they were doing. And I just left it at that. And hours later into the next day, I think we had another interaction with them. And they said, and I said, why are you doing this to me? And he says, we want you to become acquainted and get to know other parts of yourself, is what he said. So a few days later, and this was, I think, the day before. Yeah, this was the day. So this was the 20th of last month. My dog it was time for my dog to get his shots. It's like the last round of vaccines for a puppy, right? So I go in with my wife, and she's talking to the veterinarian, and I'm being quiet because I'm just, tired. I'm going through all this shit. I don't really want to get into this whole thing. So I sit down, and I'd let her do the talking. And while I'm in there, I suddenly start thinking about an argument that I had with somebody a few days prior. And I'm thinking about that. And instead of me just continuing to think about that, suddenly I'm pulled away from my body. My consciousness is no longer in the room that I'm in. And I didn't consciously leave. I didn't consciously do anything. Something took me over. The next thing I knew, I was in a room. I couldn't really, I wasn't looking at the surroundings, but felt like maybe an apartment, something, could have been a house. But I had somebody's head in my hands, and I had my left hand on the top of their head, and I was standing behind this guy. He had no shirt on. And he looked like he was he was somebody like I would describe as having an olive tinge, pretty much Caucasian, but a little bit of an olive tinge to their skin. Like like Eastern European, somewhere in there, they got like a mixture of different ethnicities. So there's a little bit of tinge of something else. And looks like somebody that lives in Russia, somebody in that area. And I'm literally doing the Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees thing. I mean, it's like, the pro wrestling move where they get somebody from behind, they got their head, and they're going like this, and they're like that, and they're pretending they're hurting them and stuff. Well, this was beyond that. I mean, this was all the way, and then crunch. where his head separated from his neck. And all I felt was this intense rush of adrenaline, an intense rage. And it was nothing else going on. There was no remorse. There was nothing. It was just a programmed action. And before it went snap, crackle, and pop, I was back in my body in the room, and I popped into myself. And I never had this happen before. I've never had any of those. I mean, I've had post-traumatic stress disorder before. I know what it's like to have these, what they call, I guess, fleeting thoughts. You're constantly racing your minds on something else. You kind of go away. People talk to you, you don't hear them because you're focused on something else that's painful. But this wasn't like that. This was just, I wasn't even in the room. I didn't feel my body. I didn't feel anything. And the veterinarian was talking loudly because the shots were already done. This was the explanation of what needs to be looked after and looked for and so forth. And they talk loud, and the room is small, and it's hard surfaces and it echo. I mean, it's an acoustical effect that amplifies the sound in this doctor's office room that I was in. So all that, I didn't hear any of it until I popped back in my body, and I realized I was literally somewhere else experiencing something from another part of myself, and it was the reason why my hand was hurt. And the first thing that they said to me is, you need to control that. And like, control it. And it's just like it's like a sarcastic comment they're throwing out there. You had a little scuffle, Nathan, is what he said. And then he says, you're gonna have to control that. Like I was having post-traumatic stress disorder and I was somewhere else. So I need to control that. And but it was just like a sarcastic comment because they were in control of it. And then I did something to upset them. I had somebody offered to send some of their positive ETs to go mess with one of my handlers, the main guy. And immediately, as soon as I accepted, he started cursing at me. And when we got done talking, I got up from the computer, and that's when I had a pulled hamstring. My hand was, all the healing that was done on my hand had been reversed. It was back to being unable to grip things. My whole upper body was cracking and popping, and I felt like I was in a car accident. And then that went on for another week plus. And I'm still going through it now, mainly with my hand. But that just goes to show you, and you got tech in you, and this is all being done to you. They can literally, if they want you to feel the pain of one of your alters physically and then have tissue damage, they can do that. This is how I would just think the best way to comprehend this is Nightmare on Elm Street. You know, if they can harm you in a dream, well, it's like they harm your alter. It can physically affect you if they wanted to. But it has no effect if they don't want it to have any effect. But they wanted me to know this. So they create these trauma splits. they clone you, and now they don't need to put your soul fragment into a clone that looks just like you. They can use hybrids. I got an itchy nose. They can use hybrids of ET and human or just ET bodies. Whatever they need to put you in, they can put you in. It doesn't matter. But so you're very useful at that point because you're like software going into a computer system. You're like the operating system for a bunch of computers. Just pop one in, and then that goes online. That connects to the Nathan network, and you've got one for you. So we're all basically feeding the energy to these alters, and they're utilizing. They don't have to be physically in a body at all times. They can pull those alters out of us, animate someone for a period of time, like my monarch female sex alter. She does what she does. She does her horrible sex acts and everything else that's terrible and abusive, and then she goes back inside me, and I'm none the wiser. And when she came through, it was after my grandmother came through. And one of the things that she said was very disturbing. She said, "Please kill me. Please kill me. I want to die." And then she said, "I want to go and be with grandma." And it was like, what? And it kind of threw me for a moment because I asked, like, what, that's like your grandmother or mine, but it was actually mine she was talking about, because she was aware that my grandmother came through, and everybody that had come through was all aware of what was going on. And there was one common theme running through what everybody said. My grandmother, the spirit guide, and the ET guy from all said the same thing. It's that they wouldn't admit that this was a prison. they wouldn't admit that there were soul traps, and they wouldn't admit that I was going to have opposition after I died. And I just got the impression that they were being allowed through with an AI filter, and that the only way they could communicate with me is if they left certain things out of what they were going to tell me. And somebody came through after that session and told me that this is a prison. And I also had one of my altars too, the one that's really high up, that doesn't, because this guy doesn't have to worry about getting in trouble by talking to me. He can, in an unauthorized way, he can communicate with me because of where he is in the the ranking pecking order of the military, and it's the off-planet version under Kruger National. So it's more or less basically a private military or private space force under Kruger that's operational out there, that's part of the military. But and this individual can pretty much call the shots. That's how high up he is. And he told me, he said, when you die, there's going to be soul traps. They're going to use everything that they can to deceive you into going into them, so that they can retain you, because they need to retain their personnel, and the MyLab personnel, because you're the original self. And that's what everybody needs to know, is that the person in this body that is going through this MyLab experience is the original self. That's who you really are, and you're under a controlled state of consciousness, and they're fracturing your consciousness and exploiting it and using it in programs. You're worth gold to them, especially the ones who are really talented, the ancient souls that can do things that the others can't. That's top priority. They go into the top positions, whatever they may be, and that's very extremely valuable assets to them, and they will do everything that they can to keep you from waking up or give you an engineered awakening, like we talked about prior to this. So you have any questions thus far of this? Because I mean, that's that's everything I know, but it's a good portion of it. And there's other stuff that we can talk about that I'll probably it'll just come out as you ask questions.
I was gonna ask, do you think you could basically relate those? I've talked to Karen Holton about this too, to a trans-dimensional experience. I've experienced them myself. Like I've told you about, like the night that I went to school for 5 years. I would consider that a trans-dimensional experience, and that sounded a lot like what you were explaining when you were talking about like leaving this stage of your consciousness, because I completely understand what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You can actually separate from this stage of your consciousness and wake up somewhere else. And Karen and I use the term trans-dimensional experiences because you literally, time here doesn't relate the same way to what you can experience there and come back here. Is that fair to say that that's something similar?
Yeah, absolutely. The easiest way to comprehend that is just look at it as I would say, a mass imagination. Consciousness is just it's the imagination. I mean, there is no boundaries if you don't want them to be. If you don't want boundaries, there is none. That's kind of the nature of the universe. It's just that the boundaries we experience are put on us. So we're in a construct of some kind here, an augmented reality, where there's rules set up that we have difficulty getting around, if we can get around them at all. The people die, we're not allowed to have contact, but people say this is God's plan. What kind of a God says, okay, I'm going to create all of you, put you all together, and put you in families. You're going to fall in love with each other. You're going to love your children and preach all this love. But as soon as somebody dies, they're gone. They're erased from the whole situation. You never see them again. And nobody remembers ever coming back. Or, I mean, there's talk of reincarnation and things like that. But I mean, for the most part, people are programmed to accept this. They're programmed to accept that there's amnesia. If there is reincarnation, if people will acknowledge that maybe it exists. Well, it's for our best interest that we don't remember. And that's what I was programmed with as a kid. As you go into the new age and you start looking for answers, you go into the paranormal research and stuff, and you get this version, this alternative version of what's going on. And the churches, you only live once and then that's it. They don't even bother with the reincarnation. It used to be, I think, part of the Bible and some of the older books, but they've taken that out. So it was too much of a pagan concept for the church, and so they didn't want that in there. But you know, yeah, it is what
No,
it is. People are programmed, and it's very difficult to get through all of this and make sense of it.
well, and exactly, and like you're saying, we're programmed to not even look. And through the last several hundred to thousand years, we've been programmed to just become more and more subservient and reliant and compliant to the system. Like, that's the whole matrix trap, is this sociological construct that's been put into place in the universal matrix, or whatever you want to call it. There's a subsystem that's been put onto our social construct as a trap, and there's a parasitic race over top of us feeding off of this whole shit show that they make us live in, right? And
Yeah,
then you throw these fucking programs in on top of it, and it's maddening.
yeah. Alex Collier, in a presentation he did in I think it was a hotel meeting room years ago. This was back. I think I seen this after somewhere time after the year 2000, and it was kind of old looking back then. So I don't know when he started speaking, but it was one of his early presentations, and he was showing images of the moon, and he was talking about a specific crater, and he says there's water under this crater. They're keeping it secret. They don't want to tell you about there's water on the moon and stuff, which is true. And there's evidence of that with the stuff that's come out from NASA. I've seen a picture of a rock, and there was water droplets on the underside of it. Or at least it looked that way. The moon does have a thin atmosphere. They didn't want to tell anybody that, but it does have a thin atmosphere. Not very much, but a very thin one. But he talked about something. He said something profound, and what he said was is that he said that there's a secret space program or some kind of colony there, and it's being run by the banking cartel. And what he said that was profound is that the banking cartel is the new priesthood. So he was comparing that to ancient times with Egypt, for example. And the priesthood was the go-between between the gods and the peasantry. And that's exactly what our governments have become. That's what these elites have become. They are the new priesthood. They're really the old priesthood in many ways, because a lot of them are related to the old priesthood, with the bloodlines and so forth. So all they've done is they've taken a very ancient program of control manipulation and adapted it to the modern age. And this isn't the first time, because we know that we've had repetitive cataclysms every 7 to 14,000 years, somewhere in there, 13,500, whatever, and that they're cyclic, they're regional, sometimes they're global, but it's just enough. It's just enough to keep humanity on the planet in a primitive state. And when they get to a certain point of sophistication, they completely knock down the house of cards, set them back to the Stone Age, and then just reapply the same religions. And you can see this, you can see evidence of this on Mars, because Mars has similar iconography to what we see here in the ruins, like with pyramids, with Mayan stuff, with imagery that you can make out that's still intact to some degree, that looks very similar to what we have here on Earth. It's because I don't think there's much deviation in the overall program. I think we've got the same religions and the same iconography, the same symbology, the same storylines are likely being done on other planets, and simply Mars was just done. Mars was used up before Earth was for the same purpose, and it's a cosmic prison system. And I was told, and you take this with a grain of salt, is that my handler said that 24% of this universe is in a quantum quarantine. I don't know if that's true, but it probably is, meaning that they're in a simulation like this, and they're unable to, to do what we can't do. They're not able to do the things that the extraterrestrials are able to do. They're confined in a state of consciousness similar to this. And if you look at the Farsight material, for example, the real danger here is that, people will say, oh, well, I don't think anything terrible is going to happen to us. I think we're just going to keep going, and we'll eventually get through all this and everything. Well, the Greys, the origin of the Greys were remote viewed not that long ago, I think within the last 2 months. And to my horror and the horror of everybody else, Greys are not actually what you would call true program life forms, meaning that They can't create a thought form and then use it to animate a body that they've manufactured. They have to use an actual consciousness, a soul. So what they found out was is that the Greys are actually the reptilians, the reptilian factions, and they've got human groups with them as well. But the negative side, the self-serving negative groups, attacked a race of people that looked kind of like the Greys. I think they were bald with big eyes. They were described in the remote viewing project as being very emotionally open, maybe even having a broader emotional span than humans do. Very spiritual, very good people. They were conquered by these negative extraterrestrials, and they genetically engineered the bodies and they put them in it under a controlled state of consciousness. So not only do you have the implants in you, you have all that, but you also have a body that's incapable of a full emotional span, and it's very limited in its ability to think. It's only there to do a purpose. So they've taken people just like us and put them into these bodies. So these Greys are actually my labs, if you want to call it that. They fit the same description. They're very, they're using the same exact way. So when they take, like for my handlers, for example, they're somebody's alters. So, I can hate on them all I want, and I can call them evil sociopaths. And, they admit it, that's what they do. It's a job. And I can hate on them all I want, but in reality, I may have some version of me doing the same thing to somebody else. For all I know, I could be done. I could have an alter that's managing you, Don, and is a sadistic,
Yeah.
horrible person. It gets off on harming you and harming your wife to be, and I wouldn't be any wiser to it. But they can literally do that to you and take you over. And I mean, I can honestly say that no matter how strong you are in your connection to God and who you and what your moral compass is, no matter what you do to make yourself a better person, they can take pieces of you and turn them into something worse than your worst nightmare.
Yeah. Before we go further, when I interviewed Audrey Walters, who has like Starnet, she is like one of these astrologically aware star seeds. Like, she blew my mind. Like, it was 60 minutes of like, holy shit. She was talking about the Greys and in the same concept and construct that you are, but she was also saying that some of them are actually becoming aware, much like we are, and somewhat becoming aware of what's being done to them. And that's why they're screwing things up, like putting people's clothes on backwards, or,
Yeah,
putting them on the lawn instead of on their bed.
right. What they
Yeah.
do when they have problems like that is they'll mind wipe them and they'll reprogram them is what they do. So that's true. And it's interesting that somebody brought that up. I'm really glad to hear that, because it does coincide with that, what I'm aware of. And also, I talked to Courtney Brown. I don't remember if this was in the interview or afterward, because it was him and Tony Rodriguez, I think. It's the last time I talked to Courtney Brown, and it was on Rob's show. And he mentioned to me that what he's gotten from his extraterrestrial contacts, which is, I believe it's Harvey. He has those conversations with Harvey. I don't know if you've seen those. If anybody out there is interested, Farsight Prime, they have really excellent content, and the conversations with Harvey are some of the best. I like it better than the actual remote, viewing, because it really gets down to a real discussion. You're not just going through what's coming through in a remote viewing session. So you get the whole full background information there. But he was talking about deprogramming the Greys and what they have to go through and how long this takes, which is interesting, because even the ones that they've got that they're trying to rehabilitate, you can give them a different body, you can put them back in a body that's comfortable to them, that has that full emotional span. But there's so much long-term healing they have to go through to overcome this. I mean, the memories that we go through can be pretty traumatic, but at the same time, you have to look at how long it takes just a little bit of information just to get over that and process it and deal with it. Imagine it all coming at once. I mean, they would have to do something to put a firewall up there to kind of like trickle it in. to try to get these people to go back to normal over a period of time. So it's interesting when you think about that and that process and what it really takes to bring somebody back from the brink of hell like that. And then you have to ask yourself, what about humanity? Look at what's been done to humans. People don't know who their real parents are. They don't know. I mean, yeah, you have your parents now, but how many parents have you had being recycled lifetime after lifetime with mind wipes? How do you come back from that? What does that look like? Nobody's talking about that. They all talk about this instant ascension. Everything's going to be instant. Everything's fine. There's going to be a solar storm or some other reason, something else is going to happen. I was told that they're cranking down the simulation tech and they're bringing us back to reality. And you're seeing an awakening. You're kind of seeing that. But at the same time, while you're seeing that, you also have to acknowledge the internet. You have to acknowledge that people have access to information now. But are we really seeing a real intuitive awakening? I think, it's hard to say because there's this particular medical procedure that seems to be geared to shutting that down too. So where are we really on that sliding scale of ascension? But we got to ask these hard questions of ourselves. But the real ultimate question is like, you have to look at this from a standpoint of facts and reality, and you have to ask yourself, what is this return to reality going to look like? How's it going to happen? And when you start to understand the mechanics of it, and then you look at the false promises that we're being fed through channeling and everything else, it tends to leave out the reality of the situation. It's like, what happens after the supposed ascension? How does this work? I want to, I'm not getting the positive contact or what people think is positive contacts. I know a lot of it is negative beings masquerading as positive. But let's start asking these spirit guides, let's start asking these ETs the hard questions. And if they don't want to answer them, then they're not worth talking to. It comes to a point where you just have to draw a line in the sand and say, that's it, no more BS. You're going to be honest with us. Is this a prison or is it not? Okay.
Yeah.
And it is, or maybe it's a partial prison. What do we do? How do we get ourselves out of this? And what is it going to do? How do you suddenly, let's just say the average person on this planet has had 100,000 lifetimes, right? Maybe more. What are we going to do with all that? They've never had a chance to process that from lifetime to lifetime. They don't know who they are. So what's going to happen when they suddenly wake up? And it's not possible to do that all at once. It would have to be gradual. Yeah. It would have to be done with the continuity of the person in mind, keeping them together as a whole being. I mean, talk about an immense amount of trauma pouring in, like Niagara Falls. It's like you're at the bottom of the falls and 100,000 gallons of water or more is hitting you every couple seconds. And it's all in the form of memories and pain and experiences you've had. And what about that? How do you reunite those families? What does the family structure look like after that? What does the human mind look like after that? We need to get down and start asking those questions and get these supposed spiritual helpers of ours, make them answer those questions. And damn it, we deserve the truth.
So. And I think you touched on something really cool there too, is like, you and I both know, anybody that was likely nerdy enough to watch this will probably know that our human bodies are very limited on the frequencies and the light spectrums we can perceive. We're very, very limited for what's going on around us. And you're exactly right. I do think it's going to be an unveiling, but it's going to be an unveiling of our perception of reality around us. You and I were talking about all of the things that we're going to be able to be doing once the unveiling starts and the unlocking of our abilities comes back. But you're absolutely right. That can't happen all at once, because if you just turn the lights on and the party's over and you can see everything, most people are not going to take that well. No, right? It's going to be like the ugly lights at the bar on steroids.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Like, nobody's going to take that really well. And everybody's like, I want to see it tomorrow. Trust me, if you saw a 14-foot tall reptilian pissed off and on the White House lawn tomorrow, you're not going to fucking want to be there.
No. Maybe
They
the
don't
crocodile
want
hunter
the
would.
reveal you're asking for.
Huh? What'd you say?
They don't. They don't really want the reveal they're asking for. It's better that it's coming slow because exactly what you said. It needs to be a slow release of information.
And in order for that to actually even work, all of the negative influences have to be removed. And we've got more than just that negative ETs influencing us, and not just government and all that. You'd have to clean that up too. But there's spiritual beings that feed off of us. And that's another thing, I was under the impression a lot of this stuff is being generated using tech, and ETs are masquerading as demons and things. And then as the experience broadens itself and I begin to meet other people and have more experiences and hear about their stuff, then I realized that there's more programs. They're literally exploiting every conscious life form on this planet that's here. And then so you created augmented reality where you shut down the population, you make them susceptible to demonic possession, parasitic infestation on the soul level, the consciousness level. And you literally create a habitat for loosh feeding. So you create a habitat for beings that are kind of on the opposite spectrum of us. I guess in their world, we're the a-holes, right? And that's what I had a funny conversation with Matthew after we did that session, or actually, no, it was before we did the podcast. And we were talking about the succubus that the CIA was having him, channel and interact with. And it was funny because he said, he goes, maybe in their world, I'm the asshole, and I thought it was hilarious because it's probably what it is. I mean, Olivia can recount being a jinn, or what people call a jinn. We don't really know what that is other than the theological stuff from the Middle East, from those religions. We know a jinn is kind of like a demon, but in a slightly different way. But she remembers an entire culture, an entire, I mean, families, it's like people, but on the opposite polar, almost like the opposite of the magnetic pole. It's like positive and negative. It's like they're more of a parasitic race, and then we're over here the opposite of that. And then when you take away people's ability to psychically defend themselves, put them in an augmented reality, plug them up, stop their psychic abilities through genetic engineering, and then implants, and then a consciousness simulation, which I believe is frequency based from Saturn. You created a nested simulation that has nested levels of what we can perceive to be the spirit world, which is very difficult to figure out. But what they've done is they've created these places, these habitats. So it's like having a place in the eave of your house that where the bees make a nest, or where you have a bird's nest. You've got the parasitic beings nesting in our reality and then feeding off of people. So you have the situation. So in other words, the Christians, the Muslims, the Jews, and everybody else, the Hindus, are all right about these negative spirit beings. They're out there and they're feeding off of us. So you've got a lot to contemplate and a lot to work through when you're talking about an ascension process. There's so many layers to this. And, I think we really need to start working on ourselves. And I think we need to start there because, really, I think the core, well, the key to this is becoming better people and working together and treating each other better and pushing the negative programming. And I'm not just talking about the societal stuff, just from this community, getting the MyLab programming, the negativity, the altars, the stuff that comes through with the altars, that negative shit that comes out of people that makes them controllable. That needs to be focused on, as well as people telling their stories. And I'm also an advocate for getting the new age out of the testimony, because it clouds it. It obfuscates it. It makes it look like it's a psychic fair and not a disclosure event. It's not a good mix. And it's how the other side obfuscates our testimony and turns it into a circus. And, when you add money in there and you start, the good news is profitable. Nobody likes to talk about the bad stuff. fear sells too, but it's better to stay on that high vibe, and to kind of go with this religious belief that if we just vibe high, none of this will touch us. It's no different than with Christianity. I had a 3-hour conversation last night with my brother, and it was just, he's bulletproof because he's got Jesus, but then he's got a lot of personal issues, which I won't go into, but alcohol is one of them. And he just couldn't understand the concept that, like, he's got Jesus, but he's miserable and he's drinking and he's opening himself up to every parasitic entity that he claims I'm infested with, because none of this is real in the real 3D world. This isn't the military. This is evil spirits. So we had this ridiculous 3-hour conversation after I had heat stroke. And
Yeah.
kind of why I'm on this kick right now, like talking about belief systems. But it's just, we got a long way to go. People aren't ready to handle these things.
I want to get your take on something you just kind of made me put together as we were talking. You were talking about the sociological resets, and it all just happens again with the same religions. And for some reason, I've jumped down the rabbit hole lately about the polar shifts, because I don't know. You can wiki this as easy as anybody else. We've had, I think it's like 136 in the last 83 million years, right? So I was wondering, what is your take on those coinciding with these resets? Because those would cause the biblical floods and the mud floods and the reef flood. And, Noah's going to need an ark and row your boat, or whatever the hell you believe in, right? We know that it's a scientific fact that it's happened over 100 times in 83 million years. So society has been reset a bunch of times.
You're referring to magnetic pole shifts or
Yes.
geographic? Okay. Magnetic pole shifts happened, and we don't know the nature of it, because for example, we know that they happen because they've found lava flows in, I think, Hawaii, and they've tested it. They found that the magnetic particles, whatever they may be, whether it be magnetite or iron or whatever, it'll orient itself to magnetic north within the liquid flow of the liquid lava, the liquid rock. And they know that at one point there was a kind of a period of time where we didn't even have a magnetic pole. It just kept wandering wildly. So, and then it finally, I think after they might have been 1,000 years, it finally balanced itself out and found its new position after it was wandering for a long time. I don't know if magnetic pole shifts are the precursor for a geographic pole shift. I know that it reduces the Earth's magnetic field. It lets in the cosmic radiation, and then it thins the atmosphere a bit because the solar winds will start to erode it away, like that happened with Mars. But I don't know if that results in a doomsday scenario, like some people think, because I haven't seen the data on it. I do know there's geographic pole shifts though, but I don't know if the two are one and the same. It doesn't make sense that the planetary system would have a cataclysmic reset every time the magnetic field reversed itself and then began to gather strength again, because it gets to its weakest point before it flips. And then when it flips, it starts to build back up. We don't know what the effects are on our crops, our environment, of the increased solar radiation, but we're pretty much close to rock bottom now. So I don't think it causes the global reset like people are looking for or thinking it does. It's just it's counterintuitive and counterproductive to life. So I think if it's built into the planetary cycle, I don't think we would see a universe like we see that's teeming with life. I think we would see a start and then a termination, and a start and a termination. And if you could beat that in time with technology and get off planet, then you could escape the cataclysm or go underground and then recoup. But I don't see that. Intuitively, I don't think it's happening that way. I think what's happening here is that they're using the moon and they're using asteroids to stage cataclysms. All they have to do, the moon, I've known about this for a long time, since I started getting contact with the military and the fake ETs and whatever else, is that all they have to do to stage a cataclysmic event is to alter the moon's orbit around the Earth a little bit. Just tweak it a little bit, and you'll have massive cataclysmic effects on the surface of this planet. So the moon is a terraforming device, a base of operations, and it's a cataclysmic killing machine. It can be used for all three of those things. So I think that's what's happening. So if we see a geographic pole shift that kind of happened around the same time of a magnetic pole shift, I think knowing what I know, I think that your best bet is to put money on the aliens doing it, the ETs staging a cataclysm for a global reset versus a natural cycle. Because we look at nature and we study it all the time. The natural system is there to promote life, regardless of what they want to say. They want to call space a dead zone, but then the Russians tell their people that they have to scrape off what they call it space plankton or something, but they're actually scraping biofilm off the ISS windows as a regular maintenance. But they don't tell us that here in the United States or maybe Canada and Europe. But the Russian government's more open, and then the skeptics could say, well, it's close enough to Earth's orbit to where there's biological organisms, the outer edge of our atmosphere, and that's causing the film. But then they don't want to address panspermia, for example. We have an ecosystem in space. It's just as much as an ecosystem as it is on this planet itself. There's life inside this planet. Almost, you can go all the way down deep in the crust, and you're going to find thermophiles living at some point close to the, right as close as you can get to that hot center as you can get, before life is totally extinguished. And you never know. We might even find some kind of plasma being living inside the magma for all we know. There's things everywhere. I mean, the universe is conscious. Like I said, I don't think that magnetic pole shifts are going to wipe us out. I think that they can wipe out our technology. They can cause massive problems. I mean, you have to take out a bunch of satellites with a solar maximum. We could go back to the Stone Age right there because we don't protect our infrastructure. We don't put a type of surge protector, device in our power grid or, telecommunications. How many satellites are shielded from this stuff? I mean, can we really handle another Carrington event? They burnt off all the telegraph wires across the United States and shut down our ability to communicate through Morse code using telegraph wires. So, I don't think we're going to become psychic after that event. I think we're going to actually start to wake up and realize that our technology is the Achilles heel of our civilization, and the people running things couldn't give a shit less about the bigger picture. They just worry about the short-term gain of making money at other people's expense, and damn the consequences.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. Like they've fired their test shot on that a couple of times, and I'm not going to kiss anybody's ass and say any phone companies' names, but I've seen entire carriers shut down for 8 hours you can tell it's just to see the reaction.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, you better upgrade your plan so that doesn't happen, so we can build better satellites so you can have better service. Right? Yeah. It's a fucking rude. Yeah. I totally agree. Like
they're social testing is what it is. Under Obama, and I don't want to get too off topic. I want to get back to the My Left stuff, but under Obama, when I was going to Capitol Hill with LaRouche PAC as kind of like an assistant to the lobbyist and stuff, just going in there in an ill-fated attempt to talk politicians out of destroying the earth. I would go there and I'd meet unusual people. And one day I met a guy who was involved with the space shuttle disaster, and he was a government inspector at the time. And he had infiltrated the Hells Angels for PCP manufacturing when he worked with the Drug Enforcement Administration. His father was like high up in the government and got him all these positions. So once he got started, it was like he just went from one career to another. So at one point he was a government inspector, but I asked him, I said, because they were doing things like they would have people up in Alaska where they were mining gold, and they would send an EPA inspector out. And instead of just having a guy show up with a clipboard and go around and talk to the owner and talk to the employees and do an inspection with a team, they'd show up with a SWAT team like they're going to kill everybody. Get on the ground, everybody on the ground. And they would literally have an incredible show of force. At the same time, the IRS was buying massive amounts of ammunition and firearms, right? The U.S. Department of Education bought massive amounts of guns and firearms. You couldn't even buy ammo in this country. There was a huge shortage, especially of 22 long rifle, because the U.S. Department of Agriculture bought it all up. So what were they doing with millions of rounds of 22 long rifle? What is the IRS preparing for? It was to create a firearm shortage, and it was to create an ammunition shortage, and to gauge what the public would do in response to this arming and ridiculous spending and arming these agencies. So, people were wondering what's going to happen if you have a student loan you don't pay. Are they going to send a SWAT team out to my house and kill my dog? We're not talking about smoking pot. They already did that for that. It's like, officer, I don't have any weed. I just have a student loan. You don't need to shoot me. And bang, 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 you're going to be shot. Well, that really never happened. But what was happening is they were testing out what would happen in scenarios to see how the public would react. So when the gold prospectors got hit with a SWAT team during a routine EPA inspection, like they committed a crime, they just wanted to see what the response was. And that's what he explained to me. And incidentally, he was the guy that went on an aircraft carrier down to the lower deck to look at a piece of one of the solid rocket. It was the hull from one of the rockets that were on the space shuttle. And he says, I knew exactly what happened. They lied about the O-rings because it was actually contractor error. It was human error that caused the space shuttle disaster. He said, I walked up to this section of the rocket, and there was molecular flame cutting evidence running down the side. So you had like a crack that had like a scorch. It was like a sooty crack. What happens is when they put the space shuttle up there, when they were using it, they have reusable rocket boosters. So they would take the hull, repack it, but it had to be X-rayed, completely X-rayed. Every square inch of that had to be perfect. There could be no stress cracks. All that pressure and vibration and heat creates stress cracks. And when these cracks form, the way they've designed it is that it can handle one mission, but then it has to be welded at 100% penetration. So they have to find these stress cracks and weld them at full penetration, and then have to grind it smooth, whatever their process is. Then it goes back into use again for the next mission. Somebody missed something, and it caused molecular flame cutting, which burnt through the metal and caused the breach, which caused the explosion. And they made up the O-ring story because they didn't want bad PR. They sent a teacher up there. I think it was 1980 when that happened. It was like the year of my abduction or a year after. And I remember how big it was. We were sending a school teacher.
Me and Spinja both watched that in public school. Like, we both have memories of being taken into the hallway. Like, it was a huge thing. Yeah. Like, and we all sat there as innocent children and watched people die. And it was like, there was no trauma counseling for us. There was no, like, you were just like, what the hell did I just watch? Okay, go back and do math now. But didn't that lady just blow up?
Yeah.
Like, there was no hugs for us to make us feel better. We were just sent home along our way and finished the school day. Like, it didn't just happen.
I think we had a moment of silence, but I don't think that was it.
Yeah.
But I remember that day too. It's like one of those days like 9/11. You can remember where you were when it happened. And I was in school and I remember 9/11. I was going to college that day, and people were standing around the television in the hallway, and something was weird. And I walk into this classroom, and on the chalkboard or the marker board, it's got if you're in the military, report to your stations. I'm like, what's going on? I walk out, and everybody's huddled around the TV up in the corner of the ceiling, and I'm watching a plane hit the Twin Tower, one of the towers, and and it's like, whoa. And I got to about maybe the last 3 minutes of the drive home, and I had to pull over and throw up. That's how it was affecting me. I actually threw up at a red light, waiting for the green arrow. And I can't even tell you where it was, exactly where I was sitting at when it happened.
I was married at the time, and I came down because my wife and I at the time had gone to the bar the night before. I had a bit of a hangover, and she was already watching TV. And I turned and looked at the TV. I'm like, what movie is this? She's like, this is Live. And that exact same time that you're talking about, I came down the stairs and looked at the screen just in time to see that plane hit. And I was like, what do you mean this is real?
Yeah.
Like, I literally got out of bed, rubbing my eyes, and watched it live. I was like, what the hell did I just see?
Right. It's like this impossible sight. a giant plane flies into a building and disappears inside of it, and then it's just a boom explosion. I mean,
Yeah.
and then you watch the towers fall at free fall speed, and you know, for longest time, so many of us, including myself, just didn't. We were so caught up in what happened, we weren't questioning what we were looking at. And some people,
Yeah.
thankfully, and then that woke the rest of us up, because back then, you know, I had a relatively normal life. I had some things that happened. I had the memory of the soul transference, but it was in a white haze. I didn't remember what, I didn't know what it was. Never thought once that I was ever an abduction victim. I knew the government was corrupt, but I never could conceive that they would do something like this. I wasn't aware of Operation Northwoods. At the time, I'm not even sure if I was aware of Pearl Harbor and how they turned the radar off 2 days prior to the attack and set it up. And it was all just an invitation to get attacked, to get us into the war and drop bombs on Japan. You know, I wasn't aware. It takes time to figure these things out. It takes a long time, actually. It's easier now because of the internet, even with the censorship. But back then, it was underground books. You had to read SWAT magazine, Soldier of Fortune, the 2 UFO magazines that were published here in the US. I read all that stuff, and I read the underground books. I would always buy SWAT and Soldier of Fortune just to get the ads in the back, because not only was it pyrotechnic related, which was what I was into, but it was also, you know, it had a lot of conspiracy stuff. And then when I found the UFO magazines, I mean, that was a treasure trove of stuff from Interlight Publishing and different things. And I was constantly buying stuff and reading underground books and learning about things. And, you know, it was quite a bizarre. I remember reading Commander X, The Ultimate Deception. I don't know if you've ever heard of that book, but it was one of the first books. It was supposedly written by somebody high up in military intelligence, anonymous person. But I mean, the majority of what was in there is accurate even today. Knowing what remembering and knowing what I've been through, you know, I think the information back then that was coming out was more accurate than what we got now, because, oh well, not as detailed as what we have now, but more accurate in its basic premise that we're an occupied planet and there's negative extraterrestrials. They've taken over our government by getting into the military industrial complex and creating programs, and then taking people over from the inside out, and taking the whole system over. They always had control of it to a degree, but this is one of the times in our history where they're literally controlling the people that run the government. They're literally controlling people in the military. Not all of them, but, you know, in these projects, the people that are in these projects, I know firsthand, aren't their self. They're completely mind controlled. And I know this because dealing with my handlers, and, you know, I've had kind of a unique situation because what it is that they wanted me to shut up and stop talking. And so they made it really difficult. They knew that I was going to eventually try to talk and that I would struggle to wake up. And was admitted to me. It came out in the session with Olivia as well. I mean, they were flat out straight up with it. They said, the reason we made you sick is because we knew you were going to wake up, and we had to do something to shut you down. And, you know, we created the spiritual deception because we wanted to occupy your mind, and your awakening had to be controlled by us. So we put you into a false awakening. And for me, it didn't work, but it took a long time to get to the point where I understood what was happening to me. And it's taken like close to 48 years to figure this out. And it's a long process, man. And I I can't pass judgment, because I'd be the biggest hypocrite ever if I looked at people in this community. They're in all different phases of understanding what's happening, and to pass judgment on them and say they're bad people because they're not getting it. And that's something that happens in this community a lot, is people just don't see things from the bigger picture, and they're very reactionary, and they get behind someone who's feeding them bullshit because they're being lied to and deceived and being used. And now we're going to get to the handler stuff. So, but it's a divide and conquer type of strategy is what they're using with us. So getting to the handler situation, handlers can come in any shape, size, and form. Just like let's start breaking down what I do know. We'll go from the very top. You know, of course, you know, the government is a handler, but we're going to just push that aside and not even go into that. The news media is a handler. We already know that. Our universities, our education system is in a sense a handler in many ways. So we'll push that aside and we'll just get down to what they're doing. And in the programs, you have my labs controlling my labs, my labs sexually assaulting my labs telling other my labs what to do. My lab, literally, I mean, when it comes to outsourcing, the negative ETs just use us to torture ourselves. So naturally, you're going to have the same structure. It works within the program. So what do we do when we put the original selves in society amongst all the other people? And I've seen a pattern, and I know this to be accurate. I mean, because I've seen some evidence of it, but I've been told this too, is that there are people that are on a reserve list in society that aren't used actively in these MyLab programs. They're not abducted like some of the rest of us are, but they're here as prisoners, and they're here under similar circumstances. They may or may not have been really good at being in the programs. They weren't picked, or they failed at what they had them do. So they just put them in society and they mind wipe them lifetime after lifetime. But then these people they'll have psychic experiences, and they'll have some low level psychic ability. They often get spirit guides that show up, and the spirit guides never say, hey, you're in a prison. Hey, this is, all these terrible things are happening. There's my labs and there's all that. Spirit guides, for whatever reason, I think it's kind of rhetorical. Because a lot of this is deception. And this chair needs to go because my rear end's hurting. But if the spirit guides are really on our side, why aren't they all telling us the same thing? Why aren't people asking that question? So spirit guides are handlers as well. So let's take a look at what they're doing. So let's just say Nathan is the my lab, and Nathan is going to be going into society. He's going to be born into a body. And we'll just say this is Project Surrogate. They're going to take me, and just like in my soul transference memory, they're taking me as the original self that's in a base. And by the way, the reason they put us in society, and I was talking to Eve Howard about this, I kind of figured this out on my own. But then when I talked to her for a couple of hours on the phone prior to going on her show just a few days ago, actually, I think it just aired on the 7th, so it should be out now. But she said the reason that they don't put us in, that the reason they just don't keep us at the base is for mental health purposes. We wouldn't be able to handle that, being in cages and prisons and things like that. And I know from my own situation that is when the original self begins to break down, as far as programming starts to break down, they start to question society, they start to question what's happening to them, and they start to be resistant to what's going on. And they want to be that agent of change, but they also want to get out of the programs. They don't want to be in this. It brings the morale down of all the different soul fragments that are in the program. So when the original self is not happy, it doesn't work. So you have to have at least some stability with the original self before the fragments will perform at an optimum level and be useful in the programs. So that's why they don't put us in cages and just don't stick us in an underground prison system somewhere, and then just kind of farm us out as soul fragments for hire and for use as slaves. It's because they need to keep us in society to maintain some mental health, some emotional health, preserve some continuity of who we are. And then while we're in society, then they can use it. So why waste an asset? Because technically I have 297 altars. So I would be included, I'm pretty sure, within that 297. So that's 296 besides for me. So how can we use Nathan in society to do what we do in programs, meaning that my lab's handling my lab. So what do we do? So let's put Nathan in society where he's going to wake up, he's going to come out, he's going to be born, he's not going to remember who he is, just like everybody else. But let's slowly start introducing psychic events into his life and start building a belief system into him to where over time he gravitates toward whatever we want him to gravitate toward. So let's say we want to make Nathan, well, we could make him into a satanic priest and he could start a cult online. Oh, we could do that with him. But what's more effective? Let's make him a new age prophet. let's put him in society. He's going to write books. He's going to do a documentary. He's going to be on the History Channel. He's going to be on Gaia TV. He's going to have meditation, types of meditations he talks about. He's going to read tarot cards. He's going to have a word salad of new age mumbo jumbo to put out there. And he's going to believe it because he's experiencing these things. It's real. It's happening to him. He totally believes it. He feels he's on the right path. And the best way to make Nathan more effective at what he's doing for us is let's modify his personality and give him narcissistic personality disorder traits. And but he's going to be a functional narcissist. He's going to be somebody that can be used, and that narcissism becomes a tool to control him. Okay, so I got to just use my nose here. So anyway, here I am. I'm in society. I'm beginning to have psychic experiences. You know, I'm given this mission in life. I have to enlighten the population. I'm going to be here like Jesus and other prophets, and I'm going to enlighten the population. I'm going to tell people how to live based on what my guides are showing me, what my ET friends are showing me, what other spiritual beings. Maybe I'm in contact with Metatron and archangels, whatever it is. I've got to relay what they're telling me to the masses. So I go out and I start doing that. And I would call that the top tier handler within our community. It would be somebody that would be influential and out there pushing a type of religious belief system, whether it be the right hand path or the left hand path. It doesn't matter because they use both. It could even be something with a Christian slant. It could be anything that really grabs a hold of that targeted audience. And that targeted audience is going to be pre-programmed for this already because they're in a prison world, their mind's wiped, and they're going to be going through similar things. So now you have a mouthpiece for the ET presence that goes out and then talks about these things and attracts these people. So now you've got kind of a Jesus character and he's got a flock. Okay. And then you can use that to socially engineer a certain segment of the population that's already pre-programmed to be sensitive to this topic, to this information that I'm putting out for them, for the ET presence. Now that doesn't sound really bad if it's, say, like positive extraterrestrials, but we're not seeing that. What we're seeing in this community is these people being propped up on these pedestals. And once they get them up there, it's a divide and conquer for the rest of us, because then you've got this person saying something that contradicts this person. They're taking shots at this person and then shots, and I could use names here, but I think we all know who these people are. And they always rise to the top. Number one, they never get any shadow banning. Sometimes they get psychic attacks, but it's a soft glove attack. It's just like a little roughing up, just enough to make you think that you're doing the right thing, and the bad guys are on your tail. But never anything that you'd go through if you weren't doing something for the cause. So you're not going to get hit with a directed energy. You're not going to make you sick. They're not going to cause tissue damage. You're not going to have fantasies about horrible, disgusting, violent sexual acts. You're not going to have any of that MyLab programming crap. It's all going to be love and light. You're going to be in perfect health, perfect teeth, perfect everything. And you're going to be out there with a perfect message, perfect graphics. You're going to have people that come out of the woodwork to help you. And literally, you're going to have people in Hollywood who want to talk to you and put you on their stage. And you'll have no issues. So there's your top tier handler and that goes with the New Age. It could be the occult. But it's often more or less, more than anything else, it's a combination, a fusion of contactee and New Age. This is the injection of poison into the disclosure. And I'm sorry to say that it upsets people, but there's no reason to take people that are program victims, who have severe trauma, who have post-traumatic stress disorder, who have a form of multiple personality disorder in the form of these alters coming through. You shouldn't put those people on a stage with somebody that talks about the Galactic Federation and whatever they're talking about. It doesn't fit, and it's being forced together to create exactly what I just described in the first place: a system of handlers. so that when you're going through this, you're going to get sucked into it. I got sucked into this. It was a way of keeping me off the trail, that if I continue to follow that trail, I would realize exactly what I was being used for. It was a way of keeping me away from it. So there's your top tier handler. Then you go in from there, you're going to start getting into groups. You're going to have these handlers are going to have groups, social media groups. Everybody's got one who's really popular, a paywall, whatever it is. So you go in there and you're following the top tier handler. You're listening to everything they say. You're immersed in the story. You don't mind paying for the paywall and subscribing. You've got something special now because you feel good, and this is what you needed to do. And you may even have your guides telling you, hey, this is where you need to go. This is who you need to talk to. This is who you need to pay attention to. So then you get into the group. Then you get into the sub handler category. These are the people that, you make some friends. You wind up having, and you kind of wind up meeting somebody that has more psychic abilities than you do. This is what I found in the Joy of Satan. I've seen this in the New Age. It's the same repetitive pattern. And you get hooked up with this person, and they're going to help you remember. They're going to help you open your psychic abilities up. And they're going to protect you from attacks. They're going to show you how to protect yourself. And then you'll have a healer usually pops in. Somebody can do healings. So they've got it all there. And then they make a kind of a sub handler from the bigger handler. And that person kind of guides a little flock. And it's always the same case. There's always somebody with narcissistic personality disorder traits that is utilized for this purpose. So you have that. From there, you can pretty much figure out what's going to happen next. And from there, it's just a series. Once you get into that, you're going to focus on the big handler and the big story, and then you'll meet these sub handlers, and then you're just going to get passed around from one to the other if you stay in it. I mean, the longer you're in it, the more you're going to have falling. You'll get with somebody, it doesn't work out, it's a falling out. A narcissist can never maintain the presentation for a long period of time. Eventually they're emotionally depleted and their ugly side comes out. And oftentimes that's actually engineered into the experience, where the program handlers of the handler that's handling you, if they want you two to separate, they can easily program something into that person and make them want to get away from you, or do the same to you. And then you go on to the next one. The goal here is to just keep you kind of on like a spiritual treadmill where you run your ass off, but you never get anywhere. And in the end, if you're lucky, you won't have your life destroyed like the things that have happened to me and other people that I've met in my experiences. But it does happen quite a bit. And then now we're going to get down to what's next after that. So these are the other types of handlers, and this is where the love bites come in. So a love bite is when they take two people who have some kind of past that they don't remember, a past loving relationship. It could be a trauma twin in the programs. It could be somebody you just fell in love with in the SSP, or any of these programs where your alters may have been in a relationship. They could use that. And then that love, that whole loving experience and all those feelings for that person comes from the altar. So it's a blending process to create that in you. So they're basically just taking that part of you and just kind of blending it with your original self, so that you have those loving feelings for that person. And nothing is more painful this is the most painful experience you can possibly imagine. Other times they're from a past life. They could be from a past life that happened, that was your extraterrestrial existence, who you were before you came to this world and got trapped here. They'll use those, and they're incredibly painful when you're dealing with something like that. And then they can use this relationship to create problems. A lot of times this other person that you're with or want to be with doesn't want to be with you. And then that creates rejection and pain. And they're oblivious to what's going on, but you're falling apart, you're suffering. So that suppresses all of your activities and wrecks your life. Every day you get up, it's like a death in the family, because you've got to relive that pain. And there's nothing that'll make you feel better than being in a relationship with that person who is oblivious to you. Let's just say maybe they're not. Maybe this person's been programmed. Maybe they've got narcissistic personality disorder. Maybe they got borderline personality disorder. Two of the main personality disorders that are given to people like us so that they can control us. And it's all based in trauma. Narcissist and borderline personality disorder is trauma based. It doesn't just pop up. It's something that's done to you, and that's the way you react to it. You adopt these traits as a coping mechanism, and now you're damaged. So now you're easy to use. One of the things that they'll do to the people that I've found that are on kind of the reserve list that aren't necessarily in the programs, and even if they are, they will pair them up with somebody. And they don't have to be in a love bite with that person. They just need to have that dependent relationship. So let's just say Sally is, she's got some psychic abilities. She feels like she wants to help the planet, help the people on it. Sally was never utilized in the programs because she wasn't cut out for it. But Sally's a prisoner too of this ET system. Okay, so what are we going to do with Sally? Because if we let Sally roam around the planet and do what she wants to do, it's gonna have a collective effect. There's going to be a lot of other Sallys and say, Michaels and Joes and everything, and they're all going to be trying to make the world a better place. So what do we do with these people? Well, we connect them, we get them some spirit guides, we subconsciously program them, and we kind of engineer a situation where they become acquainted with a narcissist, somebody that's abusive and controlling, that put them in a perpetual state of misery. And then the spirit guide will give terrible information and terrible advice. And they'll tell the person, your purpose in life is to take this individual that you're with in this relationship, even though it's toxic, we want you to help them heal and make them a whole person again. So you're here to help them. And this is your spiritual mission in life. We're your guides, and we want to use you to help this person. So now Sally is useless because Sally can never do what she wants, because Sally's got to deal with an abusive husband. Joe and Michael have to deal with an abusive narcissistic wife. Or maybe it's a same-sex relationship. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it is. They're going to pair you up with somebody toxic, and that's going to suppress you and make you miserable the rest of your life for as long as you're with them. And anybody that's been in an unhealthy relationship will tell you, usually most people don't have the financial ability. Once they've created that connection and union and co-invested in everything that they have, it's extremely difficult for poor people and middle-class people these days, especially, to get out of that situation. We don't have that upward mobility in society. So the system locks us into these toxic relationships. And it's the influence of the extraterrestrial presence and all of the other garbage that comes along with this simulated reality will push us into these toxic handler type of relationships. And from there, this is one of the reasons why we collectively, as a people called star seeds, that have a better way of doing things and a different way of looking at society and what it should be, why we can't get anything accomplished. It's because they've created a system of suppression, and it's being forced upon us with an iron fist and a jackboot. And it's extremely difficult to get out from under it. And when you have this level of division that this causes, and it causes trauma, which makes people act worse, you've got the perfect scenario, perfect recipe to take over an entire group of people that could have done something positive and turn it into a shit show. So I think that's probably the best explanation I can give at this moment for the handler situation, right off the top of my head, off the cuff. What do you think?
That was a absolutely beautiful explanation, Nathan. I know you touched Spinja. I was like running through my past relationships, and this is something I don't hide, and it's something I'm going to fucking address because it may eventually come out, and I don't care. I have had some horrible, toxic relationships when I was an alcoholic and drug addict. I will say this on record. I have never hit or struck a woman, but I have had some physically aggressive relationships that I have ended up in fucking handcuffs for the exact situation you just described, because they were some of the most deep loves that I could have possibly experienced at that time in my existence. But we absolutely hated each other on another level because it was just a love bite. I still talk to 90% of them, and we don't understand what the hell happened. It felt wonderful, but was absolutely horrible.
Mhm.
So I completely understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, and it hides right in front of us. And if you don't know that it's happening to you, you're just gonna accept it like it's happening to everybody else, and you won't know what the origin of it is. And yeah, I mean, there's nothing. By the way, there's nothing to be ashamed about being a a drug addict or going to prison or whatever the case is. It's just a symptom of this toxic civilization that we find ourselves in. And we never know. I mean, well, let me give you an example. I was in that soul transference lab, and I had absolutely no control over where I was going. There wasn't a soul contract. I wasn't picking my parents. It wasn't some big plan laid out for me. It was basically this: you want to be white or black, and that's what was offered to me, because those were the. And what I know now is, the thing is with when you're a my lab, often they put you in families together. It's almost never one person in a family and then nobody else is the my lab. Abduction victims that aren't used in the my lab type of programs, maybe just they're abducted and used for reproductive purposes, hybridization programs, they are also born into families too. Often it's the parent and the child have that relationship that both are abduction victims. And I've met quite a few people in this situation. I couldn't figure out where the other person was. My grandmother and me had experiences. Whenever she would have a major heart attack episode, we would have mutual psychic experiences. I could feel the beings healing her. Some one case, I was seeing them around the hospital bed and going into the hospital from the ambulance. Excuse me. I'm kind of being distracted. I've got somebody walking in a circle above me in a creaky floor. So where was I at, man? I kind of got sidetracked here. I feel like somebody's ready to fall through the ceiling.
I can hear them. Kind of through me. I think you were talking about your grandma.
Right.
Oh
Okay.
yeah, your grandma had heart attacks and experiences.
Okay. I'm just trying to figure out where I was going with that, because it's hard to do that because I don't have a quiet place to talk often. Anyway, I was just talking about how, that she would have these heart attacks and stuff, and then I would see the beings and things like that. I'm trying. Oh, let me just shift gears out of that. I apologize where I was going if I didn't make a final thought, which I know I didn't. It just was a brain fart. There's another aspect too, that I experienced in my life, and it had to do with my grandmother. And I've met other people in the community that wind up in this situation, and they will turn any unfortunate situation into a benefit. That's the program handlers. So I was in a situation for a good 15 years where I had to take care of my grandmother. It was a situation where I was sick and she was sick. She was towards the end of her life. And but she lived a lot longer because they kept her alive. They kept her alive, I believe, from what it was explained to me, it was for me, because they wanted to keep me going so they could keep utilizing me in the programs, but they wanted to preserve me, but keep me at a certain level of suppression that I was just held down in so many different ways. So I was in a situation where, I could have bought the house from my grandmother. I was at the right spot, but I heard on the job. I had my last paycheck, and I was scheduled to sit down to sign the paperwork, and I backed out of it. It was one of the biggest mistakes of my life. I could have gotten approved for the house and then been able to maintain it in my name. That didn't happen. So, but what happened is that my wife and I had to take care of her, and I had to stay home. And in the process of that, we had a child, and I was a stay-at-home dad. So I was dealing with that. I was taking care of her. I was going through back and neck surgeries and being targeted and not really knowing what was going on. A lot of that time I spent in the new age deception, ET deception as a contactee. But one of the ways that they will do this, they will create a toxic situation, is that as a caregiver, as another way of creating a handler, where the person that is suffering, that's being taken care of, turns into the handler. It's not that they're doing it on purpose, but because they're dependent on the caregiver and the caregiver is being targeted, they will make that relationship as toxic as possible. They will do as much damage to both people as possible, so that they literally hate one another and hate the situation they've been put in, and they feel helpless. The person who's sick feels just wants to die, and they don't, and they can't. They keep living on. That was my grandmother's problem. In my case, it was like I didn't want her to die because I loved her, but at the same time, it was so toxic that I wish there was a way out for both of us. At times that, through death, if there was if there was heaven awaiting, why can't we just go there and end this BS? And there, that's another type of handler. And like a handler situation where you're put into a situation and where there's a codependency issue, and then you can't break free, and you don't want to because you want to help that person who took care of you. And oftentimes when my labs take care of their parents and they get old and they get sick, they will turn it into a shit show like that, and it becomes a handler situation. So there's many ways to do this that aren't very evident and obvious to the victim that it's happening. So there's many ways to handle people. And when you get in those toxic relationships, like you were talking about earlier, and I was, the person that's the narcissist, they're not aware that they're handling you. They're just acting out based on their own personality disorder and the behavioral traits that comes with it. So they're just being them, but they don't realize that they're being acted upon. Their behavior is being worsened by the remote mind control. Now, if they could take over pets, and I've seen them take over police officers pulling me over on the side of the road when I should have been locked up for cannabis and having too many beers, and they just send me off with a warning, or they search the car and they don't find anything. Don, I swear to God, I went to a state forest with a quarter-pound of weed one time to give it to someone. It was the dumbest thing we ever did. I went to an overlook, and they brought beer with them. And they had empty beer bottles sitting on this wall at an overlook. And the ranger just pulled up at the perfect time. And it was like, he walked into the perfect bust. The guy knocked the bottles over the wall, and it sounded like, the story of Rip Van Winkle when he was hearing those noises in the woods, and it was echoing through the valley and stuff. It was like that. I mean, it was perfect acoustics, man. It was just, you could hear it echo in 3 states. It was on the Potomac River. It was West Virginia. And actually, I think it was 2 states. It was West Virginia and Maryland. And it was a kind of a snaking river, the Potomac River, but you could hear it in 2 different states, at least, maybe even in PA if you're in the right spot at the right altitude. But so he gets us up there, and he wants to search the work van, and I already gave the cannabis to the other people. So they put it in, of all places, they put it in the bag that they bought the beer in, and just stuffed the bin there, and it filled the whole bag up. And they left it on the center console of the van in a pile of Arby's trash, which was about knee deep. Fast food wrappers and Arby's trash, carpet in the back, right? Carpet and tools in the back. So this guy, he wants to search he sees the beer, dump it out. Now he wants to search the van, right? So I'm like, oh, we're fucked now. So he goes in, he picks up the weed, looks under it, looks in the back of the van, sits the weed back down. Now the weed was sticking out that far from the top of the bag. There was 2 ounces right there, and it was green, and it was in multiple layers of plastic, but it was so obvious what the hell it was. And it was the beer bag. Picks it up, looks under it, shuts the door, and says to the person who owns the van, "You don't have any dead bodies in there, do you?" It's like a joke because it was so full of trash. I don't think that was sensory overload. I really don't. Because after that, all he wanted to talk about is what the person did for a living and how much they were making. And he's got relatives that do flooring. And we stood there for an hour having this crazy conversation about carpet installing and trying to find work in a rural area. And then finally a camper pulled up, and he had to pull away because he was blocking the road. He was totally oblivious to anything at that point. It was like, it's the good old boys. I'm hanging out with my buddies. What do you guys do for a living? How do you make it? How's your family? I mean, it was weird. And then when he left, we opened the van up. We're like, where the hell was it? Because he couldn't figure out what he did with it. He's like, and it's like, it was literally falling out of the bag. It was upside down. It was falling onto a pile of Arby's wrappers halfway out of the bag. And that's where he left it. And it's an example of remote mind control. And I've seen it happen. That was one of the bigger ones, but it happened multiple times in my life. So when I heard Olivia's story, Olivia James, when her father, who was the big drug dealer, was busted and went to court and was facing all these charges and this incredible sentence. And then he got out on the technicality and he got put right in the military in some kind of program. And then he sold her into it. You see, because my labs run in families, and that's what I would forgot to talk about. My labs run in families. So getting back to my original point, my father was I never met him actually. I met him when I was less than a year old. So during that time, he was with my mother, and my mother was a 17-year-old runaway. So they put me in a really bad spot to begin with. I mean, they weren't looking to put me in a good place because they wanted tools to work with. They wanted that dysfunction. They wanted poverty, dysfunction, narcissism, whatever they could get. They wanted to give me a crappy engineered lifetime, which is what they referred to it. My labs are in an engineered lifetime. This is what I used to call a societal placeholder, which is actually the original self, is in an engineered experience within the civilization that they put you in. Whatever country it is, they're controlling you and your surrounding, what happens in your life. They're controlling your mind and they're controlling your personality, and they can affect people around you. They can make you, you can get you a job, they can make to where you never get one. And so anyway, here it is again. I'm getting that. I'm getting this, like they're pulling it from me as I'm trying to tell you this. That same mind blanking crap. Okay, so where was I, Don? I was on the subject of yes, my father. It's as if they don't want this talked about. And I had this for longest time. I've wondered who this man was because I had absolute no interest throughout my life. He died at 52. He died, what they said, I think it was complications. He had high blood sugar and he died of maybe diabetic something attributed to that. So he died young, which is a red flag. And usually you either die before 30, you die in your 50s, or you die in your 70s, or you kind of get to 80 and they really use you for a long period of time. The sleepers die before 30. And then you got the people in the middle. I always thought that I'd be one of the ones in the middle that died by 55. But, so here it is. I'm learning about my father. Now, my father was, his parents came from Russia. They were Polish, but they lived in Russia and they immigrated here. So there you go. And I just talked about I have an altar that's used in Poland and Russia. It's not a coincidence. Not a coincidence at all. So there's the MyLab connection between myself and that other parent, the parent that I never got a chance to meet. I bet you, I would willing to bet money, even though I'm broke thanks to this experience, despite what skeptics would say, we're all making big time money, aren't we, Don? I mean, hasn't your portfolio just skyrocketed since you started doing this wackadoo journalism stuff?
Oh, the 7 cents from Rumble filled the $110 gas tank so my wife can go work 10 hours a day so many times. I can't.
You're doing 7 times better than me on Rumble, and I've earned a penny since I had that account.
Yeah, I'm up to 7 cents.
Good for you, man. I think you're well on your way. I mean, you can buy Gaia TV in a few months. Don't worry about it. It's good. You don't even need to have them hire you. So anyway, yeah, that's the connection there that I've found. And it was confirmed because once I got to that point, it was like, the handlers do give you good information on occasion. They lie to you, but I gotten to the point where with them that it was no more, it wasn't to their advantage to keep lying to me because I kept figuring it out. It may take a year or two or a couple of years or 15, but I would figure it out. And eventually, and this is what happened after that session with Olivia. The bigger reason why it went so smoothly, I'm going back to that subject now. The reason why it went so smoothly is because they wanted to use it as a means of bridging a connection with me to talk to me. This is something that they often do. They will use other people to set up a scenario where they establish contact with you. So now they could have just talked to me directly, but I was so much animosity, and it was just, I wasn't listening to them at all. But they wanted to establish contact, because my intent of having Olivia make those, make those connections with me, or to connect me to them, was to create a dialogue. I wanted to know more about my situation, because what they had done is they set me up, and they said I'd gotten 3 threats, like one day apart. It was like the first threat was the fake, Draco warning, you're going to be mind wiped. This is the Draco. And I could just see a couple idiots sitting in a call center, like speaking into a device that transmits it into microwave straight into my head. And they're like, yeah, we're going to use the Draco line. Yeah, we're the Dracos. You're going, blah, blah, blah. It sounded really scary and like reptilian, hissy and everything. And then the next day I got threatened again by some guy that was just F you and all this stuff. And then the third one was worse, because that one actually explained himself. He explained I was going to be mind wiped, and he explained all these things. And he said, we can't handle it. We can't control you. Your alters aren't following orders. The morale is dropping. You're going to be mind wiped, and we're going to put you back, and we're going to reassign you, and you're going to be mind wiped, and you're going to forget everyone. So, that put me into that state of mind where I needed to do something quickly. So I got a hold of her, but they set you up in these situations. That was a setup. That's why it went smooth. And then when I finally made that connection, they already had a scenario set up for me. And what they wanted from me was to get me to stop talking. They wanted me to completely shut up. And I got into this community for 2 reasons. One, I felt that I had a moral obligation to tell people what I was going through, even though I didn't really know the true nature of it. I thought it was just ET contact. I couldn't explain how there was a satanic Yankee cult involved. I didn't, that part I didn't want to talk about, because I didn't know how it fit in. I didn't know how people would react to it. But I felt this need to go public. I also felt a need to get help, because obviously I needed help. And I didn't know how to get it. I tried since 2008, reaching out to people, sending emails to all the people you see, ancient aliens. I said, hey, there's a cult online. I contacted everyone, even Giorgio Tsoukalos. He doesn't respond. You can email his agent in Hollywood, but as far as him doing research, it's all show now. It's just a TV show. He's an actor now, more or less. So reached out to those guys, reached out to David Wilcock, reached out to Corey Good, reached out to everybody that I could, with the exception of Carrie Cassidy. And the reason I didn't reach out to her is because I got some threats over that, and I just decided, okay, I'll leave that one alone. And these threats are random; they're not necessarily tied to anything in reality. It's just they just want to throw their weight around and try to get you to do what they want you to do, whether there's a reason for it or not. But I could never get anybody to respond to me. And, so I went public and did it the hard way. And it took a long time to get even accepted or even taken seriously in this community, because I found that there's another layer of the handlers, which I guess we should talk about that too, which is that in the SSP super soldier community, if you want to call it that, it doesn't feel like a community. It feels like just a group of people that can't get along. And you're heavily manipulated and targeted and so forth. But when you get into this community, when I got into it a few years ago, there was only a couple of places that you could actually go and talk and get any exposure. And even, if you wanted to make an impact on the community and tell your story, you had to go through a couple of people that were set up in these positions that had these personal missions. They felt like they subconsciously programmed to be a certain particular social media personality that gives people a chance to talk. This is another type of creating a handler, is that you set people up as social media stars. They're not necessarily creating a cult like in the Joy of Satan or some of these other people, but they're giving people a chance to talk. So then what you do is they subconsciously manipulate those people. They also give them a belief system that restricts their choices when it comes to who they put on their show. So if you get somebody that coming from a satanic cult that ties that into the programs, they may not want to have you on. If you have negative experiences in the new age, they might not want to put you on. If you don't have the greatest, incredible, most exciting MyLabs SSP sci-fi saga to tell everyone on social media that really grabs everyone with absolute perfect detail, if you don't have that, then you're not marketable to a certain particular audience that this person is put in this position is looking for. You don't have what I would want to put out there for my viewers. It isn't good for ad revenue. I'm sorry, go ahead.
If you can't fill a half hour of my podcast and you're just some moron having nightmares, I don't give a shit. Oh, wait, I've heard that.
Yes, that's a good example. So I went through that and I hit brick walls. And some of these people were hostile. I mean, and people that you would think that are, just right on the level of normal people, have best intentions. They're honest. They just want to get the truth out. And I contact them, and I wound up getting 4 and 5 nasty emails from them calling me a spiritual narcissist because I'm a know-it-all. And I think the new age is a problem. It's being used to harm people and brainwash them and keep them from waking up. And, I want to entertain the concept of love bites. That doesn't happen. That's more nonsense. That's, or whatever the case is. It's just like, we don't want your testimony in this community because it's not gelling with what we believe at a religious level. So that's what I encountered when I came into this community, and that's gatekeepers. They act just like handlers, but they're different. They don't see themselves as a handler. They don't see themselves as creating a cult, but they're there to be a filter in the community. And it's based in their belief system and subconscious manipulation. It could even be conscious manipulation, where the person literally feels something negative from you and there's no basis in reality for it, but they're tied. They trust their intuition. And unfortunately, their intuition is under the control of their handlers, and they're not aware of it because they somehow have gotten to the point where they can't be touched in that way, and they can trust themselves. Sometimes you just have to kind of go and put that intuition aside in this community and give people a chance based in common sense and deductive reasoning. You need to look at it from an open mind and say, okay, this person, isn't going to embarrass themselves or me and be a part of the show. They may say something that doesn't gel with the audience, or they may say something new that I maybe think it's not true, but maybe it is. If you have that open mind and you put them on, you can shut down that gatekeeping that they're trying to get you to do. And that's one of the issues in this community. And I can give you here's a real simple example. Do you think that I'd be invited to any one of these Love and Light conferences to talk about the alternative to what's going on in the new age that people don't want to talk about? Hell no, they're not going to put me up there. I'm bad for business. So, if you question what's being done to the community, if you question and point out that there's inconsistencies and something's wrong with this picture, this looks like a prison, and the spirit guides apparently look like North Korean mentors, like this is Mr. Chung. He's going to be your mentor for the week here in North Korea. And if you step out of line, we're going to put you in a gulag, so, that's what I see. I mean, there's a system in place. And if you look for the patterns and you have an open mind, and it really helps if you've had negative experiences versus the positive, because if it's all positive, you're not going to have a balanced viewpoint. And that's what they will cradle people throughout their life and condition them to believe everything they're told by these ETs and these ET handlers. Often some of it is DARPA technology. It's not even real ETs. I can't even, other than my abductions, as far as contact goes, I don't think I ever got real ET contact. I got B2K and more advanced forms of it. And that includes pulling me out of my body and doing other things and affecting my consciousness, and then putting me in a group with a handler and other people that were going through things like that. And by taking everything I've been through and putting it in a theological envelope, they could suppress my ability to see it for what it really is. And that's the biggest problem in this community. That's why I always say, we need to separate if we're dealing with the military, then why are we dealing with the spiritual aspects of this to the degree we are? Why are we treating it like it's a religion? Why are we mixing the new age and other things and the occult in with the MyLab situation? And it's getting worse and worse. I mean, you could watch programs today, and one episode will be Interview with a Vampire, and then it's the MyLab. Well, how are people going to, from the outside, going to look at this and say, this is something that needs to be addressed? We're talking about the greatest human rights violation, or the series of violations, the greatest atrocity ever. I mean, this is worse than this is on par with the Greys and what I talked about earlier, because it leads to that. This is an occupation of a planet, and it's a victimization of potentially millions of people across in every country that's involved in this. Yet, when it comes to addressing this and giving disclosure, we can't get serious. We have to have this new age flair to things. It's the taint that makes it, that it's like taking shrimp salad that's spoiled and mix it, or almost spoiled, and mix it in with a fresh batch and hoping it works out just to save a few bucks. It's going to contaminate the whole batch, and that's what's happening. And you cannot, you have to separate those two. I mean, we're dealing with some horrible stuff, and it doesn't need to be mixed in with this other stuff. I just wish people would take a serious look at what they're doing. There's this carnival atmosphere. They want to frame the MyLab community in with the positive ET experiencers and put it all together, and put out conferences where it's like a full-blown experience, CE5, and we're doing all these things, but it's like what you're doing is you're spiritually bypassing, and you're not addressing the trauma, you're not addressing the human rights atrocities that are taking place to the level they should be, because you can't have a serious discussion. You cannot have a serious discussion about that when the next speaker, or just in general, the content itself is focused on other things. We're not going to get the clear picture here. If we're going to be taken seriously, MyLabs actually, in my opinion, have to separate themselves from this and define and draw those lines. Okay, we're not in the category of the positive experiencers. We shouldn't be mixed in with the new age. We should be mixed in with the occult. We should be treating this, from a position. You got to have the spirituality there, because we're talking about soul manipulation, consciousness, hijacking of your consciousness, taking your soul and using it. There's negative entities involved. So there's a spiritual aspect to this, but we have to treat it in the right way. We have to do this the right way, or we're not going to get anywhere with disclosure. We're just going to be stuck in the situation we are now, where, just ask yourself, I mean, how many members of Congress or members of Parliament want to talk to any of us? You know any? I don't. When it comes time to that, they want to talk to the people that are coming forward. And if you've been listening to Stephen Greer for the last 20 years, they've said nothing new that he hasn't already said. So what are we getting? We're getting on the surface at the top level with the government. We're basically getting a rehashing of the disclosure project that Stephen Greer did. It's no different. It's not going to amount to anything. There's hearings. The hearings come and they go. The government's at least admitting now that there's something out there, but they won't talk about what it is. Nobody wants. They don't want to take it seriously. And then all of this other stuff is just swept under the rug, and we're not going to get that exposure by the direction that we're taking. A carnival atmosphere, a showmanship type atmosphere, is not going to solve this problem. You can write all the books you want. You can talk about all the stuff you want on Facebook. You're in an echo chamber. That's another thing I've noticed. They don't want us talking on YouTube, so they want us to go to Rumble. They don't want us talking on X, so they let us talk on Facebook. I've been banned from Facebook. I've been banned from X from the day one, from when it was Twitter. None of my posts could be seen. I was restricted from day one. And I thought when Elon took over that they would kind of like go in there and clean that out, but no, they didn't. They're still serving this, I guess you could call it Department of Homeland Security. They're still serving these big government agencies that put people like us down in a category of a domestic terrorist. But we're in kind of a subcategory where we don't get the no-fly list treatment and all of that. But when it comes down to our ability to communicate openly on social media, we find that they've already got blocked. They've already got walls put up around us. So they've created an echo chamber within Facebook. I'm surprised that we're still
Oh,
able to talk there pretty openly.
uh, I didn't even get every episode of the Facebook page that I started for this show uploaded, and they already told me that I had violated their bullshit rules, and my page was flagged and reduced visibility. Like they told me, go fuck yourself. We're going to flag you if you don't remove this, and I'm not going to remove one of my episodes because my guest had the courage to come on and talk. So
Right.
reduce my visibility. Go fuck yourself. I'm going to put it on anyway. So.
Well, I'm getting your feed. So it's an echo chamber with myself and you and other people. You know, they just created an echo chamber. When I went, here's a good example. I've been on a specific channel. I think it's I don't know if James uses the Cosmic Switchboard for his YouTube channel or just his name, but I left a comment under one of his videos, and I could see it. I could see the comment. There was 8,000 views and nobody commented. I'm like, okay, this is weird. So I left a comment, and then I signed out and tried to look up, see if I still had a comment. It was gone. So as long as I'm signed in, I could see what I wrote, but I can't see what anybody else wrote. And it's the same for them. So we all have the illusion that we're getting a voice, that we have a voice, but nobody can see us. Nobody can read what we say. So it's either isolate you or put you in an echo chamber with others and let you talk, and then use it for intel.
That literally just happened today. I was on Typical Skeptic last night. Somebody off of like Rob's fan base had put a really nice complimentary comment on the show, and I replied and I said blah blah blah, yeah, and that whole paper's available here. And then all of a sudden the comment was gone. I got Spingy to look it up, and it wasn't there.
Right.
I'm like, what the hell? Like,
yeah.
So we've been going 2.5 hours, and I just got the warning on my phone that I'm at 15% battery. So we're gonna have to do another one because I still think we have so much more to talk about. So if we want to do something next week or something, we'll figure it out. Because absolutely love the shit with you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Before we go,
surprised I could actually talk like this because I felt like dog shit earlier. You know.
Before we do go, tell everybody about your stuff and where to find you and all that good shit.
Okay, well, here's the good shit. It's Hajayan Contactee. You can see it down in the corner of the screen here, wherever it is on your side of it. That's my YouTube channel. That's home base. Just uploaded a video recently. I got lots of stuff to put up, and I'm getting back into things. And then you can also find me at the Planetary Consciousness Project on Telegram, or the Typical Skeptic podcast on Telegram. Those two groups. I'm a moderator in my own group, and I'm also a guest moderator in Rob's group to help out with a couple of other people, actually administrators, what they call them. And I've got two channels. I got a BitChute channel, and I don't do much with, and I've got a Rumble channel, and that's under Voices of Orion. It might be under Voices of Orion Project. That tells you how little I've been there. But I'm getting back into doing more content, and I'm going to be doing it for a while and see how it goes. But for the most part, that's it. I may do a website at some point. I don't know what the future holds for me, but because I really got to put my time and my effort into fixing my life. Now that this is another thing I haven't even really talked about, how I got out of the physical targeting, the majority of it at least. You know, there's a whole nother story there that needs to be discussed. But yeah, I've been able to control assets. So, what's that?
We'll hit that first next time, is the physical targeting. So I'm going to write that right now on my notes. So that is first up next time.
Yeah, and I might have to wear a tinfoil hat to get my points across without having to repeat myself. So
I've got a big old roll in the kitchen too.
I need to sit in like a Faraday cage with like one of those, like a copper pyramid over top of it, you know, and have myself grounded to a grounding rod that runs outside the room out in the backyard, you know. So, yeah,
All right.
whatever it
Thank you
takes.
again. Thank you again. This has been amazing. I actually want to thank Ivan popped in from the Telegram group, your Telegram group that I shared the link to this. So we got somebody from that group that popped in and watched a bit. So thank you for popping in. It's always awesome to have new people. And thank you everybody else that participated in the chat. Thank you again, Nathan. And I'm just going to say goodnight. I just going to hit end, Nathan, but I'm going to plug my phone in and then I'll message you, okay?
Okay, cool. I'll go get my phone. Mine's
All
already
right.
plugged in, so I got full charge.
Okay. Talk to
Anyway,
you in a minute.